The story starts off with the description of a certain man who was uncontrollable, a reclusive sword master stuck to his room, and often labeled as a madman. He was widely regarded as the useless eldest son of Count Perdium, and this man's name was Cecil Perdium. Amidst the chaos, a knight clad in armor trembles in pain as he struggles to comprehend the reality of his defeat, since he, the finest knight in the north, had fallen to Cecil, whom he considered nothing more than human garbage. Just then, another figure approaches the knight, asking if it is warm and cozy, since he put a lot of money into making that trap. The man was adorned in fine armor and wielding a massive axe, and his cold gaze bores into the injured knight as he inquires whether he likes it or not. Enraged, the knight struggles to accept that someone like Cecil, whom he deemed a worthless bastard, could orchestrate such a scheme, and he demands to know if Cecil knew his plan beforehand. At that, Cecil moves closer to the knight and reveals that he had anticipated every detail he spoke of, including the enemy's numbers, the identities of their spies, and even the source of their reinforcements. Then, with a chilling gaze, he tells the knight that he knew it all from the start, as he was in the palm of his hand. The knight struggles to grasp the truth as he raises his voice to declare himself a hidden ace card, and demands to know how someone as insignificant as Cecil could have orchestrated such a victory. Before the knight could finish speaking, Cecil silences him with a kick to the face and commands him to stop talking. Afterward, removing his helmet, Cecil challenges him to try invading however many times he wants. But he is going to win the war the next time, and the next time after that, every single time. He then asks the knight if he understands why his victory is assured and simultaneously replies to his own question, saying it's because he got all the plans. After that, the story is taken back a year ago in the Lithuania kingdom near the Perdium state, where several camps are set up and soldiers are patrolling the area. Inside one of the camps, Cecil wakes up in a confused state, staring at his hand and wondering what just happened. He is shocked to see that he is alive and quickly places his hand on his neck to confirm this. But he is certain that he was in a different place a while ago. He remembered what happened earlier, and it was when a knight knocked his sword out of his hand. He spat out some blood when the knight attacked him, and after he fell to his knees, the knight with red hair and a golden armor said that it is now over for Cecil, who is the Mercenary King and one of the continent's 7 strongest men. With a smile on his face, the knight told him that the war is over, and this man is also revealed to be among the continent's 7 strongest men, noble knight Idun. After that, Idun pointed his sword at Cecil and asked him if he had any last words, to which he replied that he simply regrets being unable to fulfill his revenge. While breathing heavily, Cecil told him that he hoped he died, but Idun smiled when he heard this, and he called him an arrogant bastard. Idun informs Cecil that he never expected him to be the eldest son of the fallen Perdium household. He reminds him that he left his family after his sister died. Surprised to hear this, Cecil asks Idun how he knows this when he comes from a different kingdom. In response, the noble knight tells him not to be surprised and reveals that he knows a lot about him, because he once worked tirelessly to track him down. With an evil smile on his face, Idun reveals to Cecil that they were the ones who worked with the Delphine household to bring down his family. Shocked by this, Cecil realizes that there were more people involved in the fall of his household than Duke Delphine's family. As Idun moves his sword closer to Cecilin's neck, he tells him that he does not need to know more, since he is going to die anyway. And soon after, he asks Cecil to accept his fate. Annoyed by his actions, Cecil declares that he will never forgive him. However, Idun does not care, and without hesitation, he beheads Cecil with a single strike. Suddenly, the scene shifts back to the present, where Cecil moves closer to a barrel of water, wanting to check if his head is still on his neck. He wonders if he is hallucinating and notices that he looks much younger. Looking around, he wonders if he has been taken captive and used as a lab rat by some mages. Then, he promises himself that he will make the arrogant bastards regret keeping him alive. While scanning his surroundings, he notices a sword lying next to the barrel. Just as he is deep in thought, he hears someone calling him young master. The person steps into his tent and asks him to come out, saying that he knows he is awake. This man turns out to be Ricardo, a soldier of the Perdium household. However, before Ricardo can take another step, Cecil appears behind him and places a sword to his neck. Shocked by that, Ricardo remains still. In a serious tone, Cecil informs him that he will let him go if he answers his questions correctly. Referring to Cecil as young master, Ricardo tells him that he is crossing the line. Cecil is surprised by how casually the man speaks. He does not expect such a relaxed reaction from someone being threatened. He curiously asks Ricardo what he is talking about. In response, Ricardo pushes Ghislaine back and explains that he tired himself out from his tantrum earlier, and then fell asleep. This revelation shocks Ghislaine, but while touching his neck, Ricardo asks if he has forgotten everything after sleeping. He reminds him that he was throwing a tantrum about wanting to command the group for an orc raid. Ghislaine cannot comprehend what Ricardo is saying and demands that he stop spouting nonsense. Then, Ricardo picks up a bag and tells him to pack his things, explaining that people are waiting. With a nervous expression, Ghislaine asks where they are going. As Ricardo walks past him, he casually states that they are heading to the Perdium estate. Ghislaine is stunned hearing this, so he quickly turns around, grabs Ricardo, and demands that he repeat himself. In disbelief, Ghislaine asks if he is referring to the fallen Perdium estate. The scene shifts, and we see Ghislaine standing at the edge of a cliff, looking at his estate from afar. He is certain that this is indeed the Perdium estate. However, he does not understand why it appears intact when he remembers it being reduced to ashes. Ricardo moves closer and asks if he had a nightmare. He cannot believe that Ghislaine would call their household a fallen one. He warns that if the Count hears this, he might kick him out. Still unconvinced that everything is real, Ghislaine pinches his cheek to confirm whether he is dreaming. Feeling pain, he finally realizes that this is reality. Since he has a younger face and his estate is still standing, Ghislaine deduces that he has returned to the past. He recalls that his younger self resented his household. His immaturity and feelings of inferiority led to trouble, causing many in the household to avoid him. Unable to withstand the criticism, he eventually ran away. Several years later, he became a mercenary, surviving countless battles and honing his skills. After achieving so much, he returned to his county to make up for his past mistakes. But unfortunately, by the time he arrived, his household had already been destroyed. Now, standing before his family flag, Ghislaine realizes that everything is still here. The people he holds dear are alive. Overwhelmed, he laughs like a madman. He can hardly believe what has happened to him. For a moment, he even wants to sing in joy. However, he quickly reminds himself that it is too early to celebrate. He recalls that Ricardo mentioned the orc raid. Ghislaine can never forget what happened in his past life on the day of that raid. Most of the squad members died. In his past life, Ghislaine had insisted on leading the raid squad to make a name for himself. At that time, reports suggested there were only 3 orcs. He confidently assumed the battle would be easy despite having no experience commanding a squad. But unfortunately, reality was much worse. More than 20 orcs appeared, and almost everyone died due to his stubbornness. Pulling himself together, Ghislaine assures himself that he can handle the monsters, since orcs do not use strategy. However, his biggest concern is whether the soldiers will trust him, as they see him as a useless fool. As he is deep in thought, a loud crash interrupts him. A wooden guard post is thrown in front of him. One of the soldiers screams, warning the others that the orcs are here. The men immediately try to take formation. Ghislaine gets shocked that the orcs have arrived earlier than in his past life. They tear through the soldiers effortlessly, overwhelming them with their massive weapons and brute strength. A man in blue armor orders the soldiers to maintain formation and not panic. This man is Skaven, the commander of the raid squad. Just as he moves toward an orc, the monster swings its weapon at him. Skaven manages to block the attack with his sword. However, he realizes that his squad let their guard down. He cannot believe that they have been ambushed while unprepared. Moreover, he is stunned to see far more orcs than reported. Before he can gather his thoughts, someone tells him to look behind. It was an orc who is about to crush him with its weapon. But before the strike lands, someone dashes toward him and shoves him aside. It is Ghislaine. Skaven is stunned to see his young master. Before the monster's axe can touch Ghislaine, he stabs its hand and slashes its fingers off. Without hesitation, he then slices its thigh. The soldiers watch in shock as the orc falls, screaming in pain. He realizes he cannot use mana yet and regrets not returning to the past earlier. Then he turns to Skaven and suddenly demands something, to which the commander confusedly asks what he means. With a confident look, Ghislaine declares that he wants the commander's rights. Skaven is taken aback since he knows Ghislaine is an idiot, but he never expected him to demand the right to lead when the lives of their soldiers are on the line. Standing firm, Skaven refuses, at which Ghislaine becomes startled. He then questions whether he thinks the battlefield is a game, and explains that he cannot hand over the authority granted by the Lord so easily. Though annoyed, Ghislaine understands Skaven's logic, as after all, he would react the same way if an idiot asked him for the right to command. While contemplating his next move, an orc suddenly charges at him. Skaven then warns him to step back, stating that he is too inexperienced to lead. However, Ghislaine prepares to swing his weapon with a cold gaze, realizing he has no choice. To everyone's surprise, he throws his sword, which Skaven barely dodges. He then grabs Ghislaine by his collar and angrily demands an explanation for what he is doing. Just then, he hears something, so he moves around his head in surprise to see Ghislaine's sword embedded in the middle of an orc's head. The monster does not even get the chance to scream, and in the next moment, it collapses instantly. Witnessing that, Skaven shockingly wonders how his young master managed to strike the orc's weak spot so precisely. Meanwhile, Ghislaine calls out to him and asks what the most important thing on the battlefield is. He then declares that victory is impossible when soldiers are paralyzed by fear. And as he says this, the troops tremble at the orc's roars. Afterward, with a smile on his face, Ghislaine tells the man that they need to gain momentum. The moment he says this, he runs forward, takes out his sword from the orc's head, and jumps directly into the middle of the monsters. He then lands on one of the monsters and stabs it in its head to all the soldiers' surprise, including Skaven. While standing on top of the orc's head, Ghislaine screams at the top of his voice, calling out to the other monsters and daring them to come at him. Then, retrieving his sword from one of the orc's corpses, he declares to the monsters in a loud tone that he will kill all of them. Afterward, the orcs quickly turn their attention to him, but Ghislaine skillfully cuts the first two orcs in their stomachs and severs the hand of the third. Meanwhile, watching the orc heads flying around, Skaven wonders if he is dreaming. Even though he is a mana user, he finds it hard to do anything, and yet, his skinny young master is tearing the monsters apart. The commander quickly realizes that Ghislaine is already tired. However, Skaven sees that he is using the smallest of movements to dodge attacks and striking the orcs in their weak spots with precise swordplay. He then comes to the sudden realization that Ghislaine is fighting like a monolith sword master, or even something greater. On the other hand, Ghislaine taunts the monsters, claiming that he is still not yet warmed up. While running away, he shames the orcs by telling them that they are not living up to their reputation as a warrior species. At that, Ricardo is shocked to see all the orcs charging at his master, while another soldier next to him notices that Ghislaine is running away despite talking trash. Ricardo then calls out to his commander standing in front of them, while Skaven finds it hard to comprehend what Ghislaine is thinking. He believes that it was a smart move for him to run into the orcs to get their attention. But he does not understand why he would run in that direction, as he is certain that the path leads to the edge of a cliff. The moment he thinks of this, Skaven realizes something. He understands Ghislaine's intentions and quickly orders his troops to raise a shield wall, instructing them to follow the young master. On the other hand, when he reaches the edge of the cliff, Ghislaine tells himself that if Skaven is a skilled commander, he will understand his plan, although he would prefer to kill all the orcs on his own, but his awful stamina cannot handle it. With a smile on his face, he thinks that even then, this should be enough for them to handle. Immediately, he thinks that the orcs hear someone coming at them from behind. When they turn around, they see the commander and the rest of the soldiers forming a shield wall, while holding their spears tightly. Ghislaine smiles when he sees this and says it is perfect. The moment he says this, he jumps off the cliff, and while he is mid-air, he signals the troops to start the plan. On the flip side, immediately after Ghislaine jumps, Skaven orders his troops to push the orcs off the cliff. The soldiers move close to the orcs and stab them with their spears in an attempt to push them. While screaming at the top of their voices, the soldiers successfully push the orcs off the cliff. At that, the orcs start dropping into the ground, and a while later, the area becomes covered in blood. Meanwhile, the soldiers are shocked to see what they have done, as they cannot believe that they have managed to kill all the orcs. Immediately after they take care of the monsters, Skaven moves to the edge of the cliff and calls out to his young master. To the man's surprise, Ghislaine has pushed his sword into the cliff and is holding on tightly. While breathing heavily, he smiles at Skaven, whereas the commander becomes relieved to see Ghislaine. He stretches out his hand and asks him to grab it, but unfortunately, Ghislaine's stamina is insufficient, so his grip slowly loosens. Before he can reach for the commander's hand, he lets go of the sword and falls. While witnessing that, Skaven and the soldiers become shocked. The scene shifts, and someone calls out to Ghislaine while addressing him as Big Brother. He immediately recognizes this voice and calls out to the girl whose name is Alina. He remembers how the girl cried when their mother died, how she used to thank him for helping her, and he also remembers how his sister told him that she hates him. Ghislaine becomes surprised to see memories of Alina, and while he is thinking, someone grabs him. The person turns out to be Alina, and the little girl tells her brother that she wants to go with him. The moment he hears this, he opens his eyes and finds himself in a room with a cloth on his head. Looking at his hand, Ghislaine figures out that he is alive, and it looks like the soldiers have managed to save him. He wonders why he had such a weird dream when suddenly, he feels pain all over his body. Soon after, he realizes that he is suffering the consequences of pushing his body to the limit. But on the other hand, it makes it easier for him to know that he is still alive. While he is shaking in pain, someone steps into the room, calling him Master. The person is revealed to be a maid with white hair, and she is happy to see him awake. Meanwhile, Ghislaine becomes shocked to see the woman as he recalls that her name is Belinda. The maid then places the bucket she is holding on the table and tells her master that she was quite worried about him, and she reminds him that she told him to let the soldiers handle everything. However, to Belinda's surprise, he rushes to hug her. Seeing that, Belinda becomes shocked and asks her master if she offended him, to which Ghislaine tells the woman that he is simply happy to see her. Belinda is Ghislaine's personal tutor, and since he was little, she has been the only one who continued to stay by his side, despite his idiotic antics. However, after the Perdium family fell into ruins, Belinda went missing, so Ghislaine was no longer able to see her again. Afterward, Belinda asks her master to tell her why he is happy when they see each other every day. Meanwhile, with a resolved expression, Ghislaine decides that he needs to tell Belinda the truth. Then, he tells her to listen carefully to him, and reveals that a catastrophe will soon strike their family, to which the maid asks her master to explain what he means. With a serious look on his face, Ghislaine reveals to the maid that he died and came back to life, but Belinda laughs, and tells him that she knows the orcs almost killed him. Hearing that, Ghislaine tries to make her understand that he is not talking about that, but Belinda explains to him that he is the one in danger, not the family. While the maid is warning Ghislaine, he realizes that she doesn't believe him, and he guesses this won't work. Belinda then asks her master to tell her what he would have done if he were too hurt to go to the festival. While hearing that, Ghislaine becomes surprised. She continues to ask her master if he has forgotten, reminding him that Alina has been waiting for this day to go to the festival with him. Moreover, she explains to Ghislaine that this is a great opportunity for him and his sister to become close to each other again. While looking at a picture of him and his sister, Ghislaine remembers that a festival always happens at this time of the year. In his past life, he did not have time to enjoy the festival because of his traumatic experience. Later, Ghislaine asks his maid to tell him when the festival will start, to which Belinda replies that it will begin next week. Knowing that, he recalls a week from now is the day that his life changes, and while he is thinking, someone steps into his room asking if Ghislaine is inside. Meanwhile, Ghislaine becomes shocked to see who came into his room while thinking about a memory that continues to haunt him. He recalls that a week from today, his sister will die, and the person who stepped into the room turns out to be Alina. As soon as she enters the room, he runs to hug his little sister. Belinda becomes shocked to see this, while Alina becomes dumbfounded to see what her brother did, while asking if this is some kind of prank. In response, Ghislaine whispers into his sister's ear that he missed her. Alina pushes her brother back when she hears this and tells him that he is creeping her out. Meanwhile, Ghislaine finds it shocking to see how his sister easily pushed him back, and he never knew that she was so strong. Then, while dusting her clothes, Alina informs her brother that she came to see him because Belinda asked her to be here, and to know the kind of game he is playing, and if he believes that this will make everything okay. But Ghislaine asks what she is talking about. At that, Alina reminds her brother that he asked her to go away because she is annoying, and he told her that he feels disgusted just from feeling her breath. Ghislaine becomes shocked to hear that, as he said this to Alina and remembers that he was not the closest person to his sister in his previous life. He was actually a complete piece of trash. Afterward, as Ghislaine apologizes to his sister for his behavior, Belinda feels shocked to see that her master actually apologized first, while Alina asks her brother if his head is alright as she remembers hearing that an orc hit him. Hearing that, Ghislaine becomes annoyed and hastily asks why the two of them keep implying that he got hit, adding that he was the one who got the monsters. The moment he says this, Ghislaine feels a large amount of pain in his body, and as he falls to the ground, with a creepy smile on her face, Alina tells her brother that he came back unconscious after fighting the orcs. The maid and Alina laugh when they see the way he is trembling, while Ghislaine surprisingly looks to see the two of them laughing, but he is happy to see that everyone acts exactly how he remembered them. He then wonders why his past self wasted so much time on useless things, and in the festival that happens next week, he rejected Alina's offer to go together, making an excuse that the things that happened in the raid made him upset. This was the last time he saw his sister, and Alina's body was later found shredded to pieces along with her bodyguards. Ghislaine then grabs his chest in pain, thinking that he should have been with his sister. While he is thinking, someone knocks on his door and grabs everyone's attention. Afterward, two men in armor who are Alina's bodyguards, Jamal and Philip, open the door and inform their mistress that they were waiting for her. Alina asks the men if something is wrong, reminding them that she asked them to wait outside, to which Jamal apologizes to Alina and reveals that the servants asked her to oversee their work on the festival supplies. Ghislaine becomes surprised to hear this and asks the man why the maids would ask Alina to do such a thing. To that, Belinda tells her master that he knows nothing because he always lazes around all day, adding that there is a shortage of workers in Perdium, so even the young lady has to work. While Alina is leaving, Ghislaine wonders if they are actually short on workers, but it is impossible for him to know anything about it because he never cared about such things in the past. The moment she turns around, Ghislaine tells her that he wants to help as well, and hearing it, Alina makes a joyful expression. However, Belinda says she cannot believe that her master volunteered by himself, and at the same time, Alina wonders if her brother really got hit on his head. Moving on, in the town, several servants and workers arrange and prepare for the festival. The townspeople hear Alina chasing her brother away, and telling him that people will be too scared to work with him around. At that, Ghislaine asks his sister if this is how she treats people who want to help, to which Alina tells him that the best way for him to help is to stay out of their way. While his sister pushes him away, Ghislaine remembers that her body was found near the slums, far from the festival grounds, and he believes that someone must have either called Alina out there or forcefully moved her. To prevent this, Ghislaine realizes that he needs to know the ins and outs of the castle first. While Alina struggles to move her brother away, a soldier runs to him and refers to Ghislaine as his lord. Ghislaine immediately recognizes this voice and is surprised to see the old soldier. He calls the man Old Man Fergus, and while breathing heavily, Fergus wipes his sweat and looks relieved to see that his master is well. The man then grabs Ghislaine and refers to himself as a lowly servant, telling him that he ran to him the moment he heard the news about the orcs. But Ghislaine says that everyone can stop talking about it now. Alina commends Fergus on his great timing, explaining that her brother has been acting weird since he woke up, and begs him to take him to his room, whereas Ghislaine is annoyed to see how his hooligan image keeps getting in his way. He realizes that he has to give up for now and decides to learn more about the castle the following week. Instead, he tells the old man about an abandoned training field in the castle and asks him to take him there, to which Fergus surprisingly asks his master why he wants to go there. In response, Ghislaine flashes a serious look and informs him that he wants to train. While hearing that, Fergus makes a shocked expression. At that, Fergus guides him to the place, and the scene shifts to Ghislaine and the old man arriving at the training ground. While looking around the place, Ghislaine thinks that it's a perfectly suitable location for him to train, and he never saw anything like this when he was a mercenary. Afterward, Fergus reveals that they kept it maintained in case he ever wished to use the facility. He also tells him that he always believed what he was going through was just a phase. Hearing him, Ghislaine realizes that the man did this for him even in his past life and finally understands what happened. He then taps the man's armor, telling him that he wants to live a long life and reveals to Fergus that dying feels horrible, to which the old man asks his young master why he is speaking, as if he has already experienced life and death. With a confident smile, Ghislaine commends the old man for being sharp, explaining to him that he died and was resurrected. But Fergus tells Ghislaine that he is not interested in jokes. He then asks the old man to step out, telling him that he wants to start training, at which Fergus bows his head and informs his master that he will be waiting outside. As Fergus leaves the hall, Ghislaine thinks that he has always treated everyone around him like they are his enemies, but he realizes that he was too short-sighted. In the past, it was revealed that the person behind Alina's death was a lord from a neighboring territory, and because of this, Perdium got caught up in a war leading to its downfall. Alina's death was essentially the starting point of the household's destruction, so that's why he decides to set things straight in this life. In order to achieve his goal, he knows that he must get a better physique, but unfortunately, he does not have a lot of time. Still, Ghislaine is certain that he will at least be able to learn mana control. He sits in a lotus position and begins to meditate while narrating that mana is a supernatural resource that allows humans to break through their limits. Most people say that noticing and absorbing mana is the hardest part, but he was able to do this easily, even on the chaotic battlefield. He then connects the mana particles floating in the air and bundles them together as if he is spinning a spool. For someone like him, who has experienced thousands of battles, it is a piece of cake to create a mana core. However, this is not enough, as he did not join the 7 strongest men in the land with just this technique alone. Using the method from the half-burned book of magic he picked up and the natural mana core of humans, he is able to create a second and even a third core. Soon after, he forms a connected mesh of multiple cores to generate an explosive force. However, in the process, Ghislaine screams out in pain and spits out blood from his nose and mouth. He is surprised to see that he is only able to create 3 cores even though he actually managed to form 5 in his past life. This method allows one to generate explosive power in a short time, but it also requires an extremely large amount of mana in return. This was the primary reason he lost to Idun in his past life, since the noble knight brought an entire order of knights to fight him when he had run out of mana. He knows that this technique is unstable, but this is enough for now as he has a youthful body and plenty of time. He assures himself that this time, he will be the one to behead Idun. With a look of anger on his face, Ghislaine promises to destroy the bastards who helped House Delphine to bring down his country. Moving forward, the scene shifts to the day of the festival, where Ghislaine gears up and walks into the festival grounds. Alina becomes speechless to see her brother and asks him if something is wrong, reminding him that he never used to attend events like this, whereas Ghislaine explains that he needs to come to these things once in a while since he is also a member of the Perdium household. Later, Alina tells her brother that he has been acting weird recently, since she heard he has been training for the entire week. With an annoyed look, Ghislaine replies that there is nothing unusual about the air of a knight family training, but Alina reminds him that he never cared about these things before. She recalls that he once said their father is annoying, and he cannot wait to become lord. Then, with a bright smile, Alina tells her brother that she likes the way things are now, adding that it feels as if he has returned to his old self. Hearing her, Ghislaine becomes speechless, and the next moment he thinks that he realized something over the past week. Because his actions have changed, both his reception and his future are also slowly changing. Although the general flow of events remains the same, it is difficult for Ghislaine to gauge the impact of his actions on small details. Therefore, making good use of the information from the future is his job, and he needs to respond to each situation effectively. Afterward, Ghislaine follows his sister around during the festival, carefully watching his surroundings for any suspicious behavior. After walking around for a while, Alina sits down and tells her brother that she enjoyed the festival a little, but it is a bit boring to have the same thing every year and wonders if there is anything new this time. Meanwhile, Ghislaine finds it odd that nothing has happened to his sister even though the festival is almost over, and wonders if this is because he is with her. While he is thinking, someone asks Alina if she wants to check out other areas. The person turns out to be a soldier, and he explains that his friend told him there are new events elsewhere, and asks Alina if she would like to go with him. Alina becomes surprised hearing this, so she grabs the soldier's hand and excitedly says that the events must be fun. Upon seeing this, Ghislaine realizes that the 2 soldiers in front of him are the traitors. He cannot believe that Jamal and Philip are the ones who betrayed their household. Alina's bodyguards are the most trusted knights in the feud because they have protected Alina since she was a little girl, and it was known that they were murdered while protecting her in the past. Moving forward, with a smile on his face, Jamal welcomes his mistress to the event, but to the girl's surprise, there is no one there. Alina does not understand what is happening and asks Jamal if there is really going to be an event in such a dirty place. With a nervous look on his face, Jamal tells her that the people must not have prepared yet, and that they will arrive soon. But Alina believes her bodyguard is joking with her and asks him if she would perform in such a place. While she is talking, Ghislaine looks around, thinking that although the place looks like a simple deserted street, he can tell that the men have carefully blocked the escape routes. He realizes that they must have made their preparations in advance, but while he is thinking, his sister pulls him and asks him to leave with her. At that, Jamal asks his mistress to stay and see the show, to which Alina tells the man that she is not going to watch a show in a place like this. Ghislaine then asks his sister if she works out, telling her that she is quite strong. Before the girl can reply, Philip appears in front of her with a scary look on his face and asks Alina to wait for a little while. Meanwhile, Alina becomes nervous when she sees the look on his face. She tells her 2 guards that they are acting strange and asks if something is wrong. Jamal apologizes for scaring her, but in the next moment, with a creepy look on his face, he informs his mistress that a reasonable request has come in, whereas Alina becomes surprised to hear about a request. The moment Jamal says this, 3 men walk into the area where 2 of them are wearing black clothes, while the other, who appears to be their leader, is dressed in a blue coat with a matching hat. The man is revealed to be Frank as he commends the men on their smooth work. Hearing that, Jamal walks up to him and tells him that they have brought their mistress as promised, and their deal ends here. Frank then notices that Ghislaine is also there with Alina, so he tells Jamal that he never asked to bring him. With a crooked smile on his face, Jamal responds to Frank that he will give him Ghislaine for free, since he followed them foolishly without realizing that this would be his graveyard. Ghislaine asks Jamal if he really believes that he can get away with selling them out. In response, Jamal flashes an arrogant smile and tells him to worry about himself, since they can simply run away to a faraway place. He adds that he and his friend are sick and tired of the impoverished land, which is tormented by barbarians, and he believes that there are plenty of others leaving the country besides them. The moment he says this, Ghislaine moves close to him and performs a diagonal slash, easily cutting through his armor. Witnessing that, everyone present in the scene, including Frank, becomes startled. Then, as Jamal's body tears apart, Ghislaine tells the man that the people who left never tried to sell them out. Immediately after, he turns to Philip and asks in a menacing tone if he is wrong. At that, the knight quickly grabs Alina and calls Jamal an idiot, since he cannot believe that a knight would lose to an amateur. Before Philip can unsheath his sword, Ghislaine throws his own blade directly at his forehead. Unable to comprehend what just happened, Philip dies instantly on the spot. Afterward, Alina quickly runs to her brother as Philip's cold body falls on the ground. Witnessing that, one of the men in black asks his boss if they are really looking at the eldest son of Perdium, while the other man tells Frank that he has never had any real combat experience or fundamental training. Knowing this, Frank tells the men that they are definitely looking at the eldest son of Perdium, thinking although they were caught off guard, he cannot believe that he killed 2 knights instantly using mana-infused attacks. On the other hand, while shaking, Alina asks her brother to explain what is happening. The moment she asks her question, Ghislaine strikes her neck and knocks her out. He then carefully places her on the ground and tells her to have a little rest. Afterward, as he looks behind, Frank thanks Ghislaine for making their work easy. He adds that he is much different from what he has heard, and reveals that they were planning to take care of those 2 themselves. The man then smokes a pipe and asks if he has been hiding his true skills. In response, Ghislaine pulls his sword from Philip's head and asks Frank why he cares about his abilities. He takes a careful look at the 3 men, thinking that the ones in black are nothing to him, but the one in the middle exudes the amount of mana on a different level. He realizes that he has to end the fight quickly, so he releases his mana and takes out some strings. Before engaging, he asks Frank to tell him who made the request, to which he replies that there is no need for a dead man to get that information. With a determined look, Ghislaine says he already knows that they won't answer easily. He then takes a stance and menacingly tells them that they will soon spill out the truth anyway. Afterward, one of Frank's subordinates asks him if they should sever his head, to which the man tells his subordinate that he wants them to capture him alive and break all his bones so that he can't help but go mad. With a creepy smile on his face, Frank says that he has to be screaming in pain for the shape to come out beautifully. The moment they hear this, the 2 men rush to attack him while responding to his statement. On the other hand, Ghislaine takes something out of his pocket and throws it at one of the men. Upon closer look, the man is taken aback since he notices that it is a firecracker. The moment he loses focus, Ghislaine moves close to him and stabs him in the head, while splitting the firecracker in half. The other man calls this a shallow trick and quickly moves in closer to attack him. However, Ghislaine skillfully maneuvers his sword behind him and uses it to block the attack. While holding on, he puts his hand around the sword and locks it between his armpits. Then, he takes away the sword from the man's grasp while preparing for the next attack. Soon after, before the man can react, he beheads him in one strike. The moment he does this, Frank attacks from his blind spot, but Ghislaine manages to block the attack with the other sword. Seeing that, Frank becomes surprised to see that he managed to block his attack in this position, despite it being a perfect sneak attack. Just then, Ghislaine quickly pushes the man's sword down and skillfully strikes, making a clean cut on his neck, and at the same time, the man's pipe gets cut in half and falls to the ground. To his surprise, Frank launches another sneak attack, which he blocks using both of the swords. Then, using mana on his neck, Frank tells him that he is actually surprised, as he would have lost his neck if he was lacking in mana. At that, Ghislaine shockingly wonders how he survived an attack on his neck, and if the man focused his mana around his neck to reduce the damage. Afterward, Frank takes a stance and tells him that he does not know where he learned his strange swordsmanship at that age. Then, with a creepy smile on his face, the man promises him that he will die here. Frank then pushes him back and tells him that he cannot defeat him with his feeble mana. He assures him that he will die here. But to the man's surprise, Ghislaine flashes a smirk when he hears this, whereas Frank fails to understand why he is smiling. Ghislaine then skillfully pushes the man's sword away, making him lose composure. Immediately after, he shifts the balance of his body and uses his leg to kick him in the face. Frank quickly steps back after receiving the attack, and with a smug look on his face, he reminds him that his attacks won't work with his tiny mana. The moment he says this, he suddenly spits out some blood, falls to the ground, and begins to cough heavily. Seeing that, the man fails to comprehend why Ghislaine's attack is much more powerful than before, as it should have been impossible for him to pierce through his enhancement with his current skill level. Ghislaine then slowly walks up to the man, stating that he never expected anyone to be the true culprit behind his sister's death, but now he understands that it was all because of him. Afterward, with a scary look on his face, he unleashes his third core and warns Frank to prepare himself. Witnessing that, the man shockingly questions how he is able to boost his mana so greatly. Before he can think about it, he sees Ghislaine in front of him while dual-wielding his weapons. As he thinks about how fast he has become, Ghislaine attacks the assassin with a series of slashes, but Frank barely blocks the attacks. Then, with a menacing expression, Ghislaine launches an aggressive attack using both of the swords, which the man struggles to defend. In the midst of blocking his attack, he fails to comprehend what is happening, since his hands are turning numb just from blocking his attacks. While looking at his almost ruined sword, the man reminds himself that there is usually a limited effect when someone draws a lot of mana. However, this is different for Ghislaine, as he has never heard of a method that increases mana so explosively. Then, as he stares at Ghislaine, he thinks that it is as if he has become a different person. While Frank is trying to regain his stance, Ghislaine uses his sword to crush the man's weapon. Immediately after, he lands a heavy strike on his body, cutting him diagonally. Then, as blood spurts out of the man's body, Ghislaine grits his teeth and thrusts his sword into his body. At that, the assassin screams out in pain and coughs up some blood. Before he can continue screaming, Ghislaine places his hand on his throat and pushes him to the wall. While holding onto his sword, he tells the man that they need to continue their conversation from before, and then he demands Frank to tell him who requested the assassination. The moment he questions him, the man takes out a hidden blade and tells himself that he will not go down so easily. Then, looking at Alina's unconscious body, he decides to take the young lady of Perdium along with him. However, before the man can throw his blade, some strings reinforced with mana grab his hand. Ghislaine is revealed to be the one who took out the strings, and he asks the man to make a deal with him. Then, with a cold gaze in his eyes, he tells the man not to make any stupid moves and assures him that he will return his sword to its sheath. Meanwhile, Frank wonders if these are threads created with mana, and when he had the time to create such a thing. Later, Ghislaine pushes his sword deeper into the man's body, telling him that someone on his level should be able to patch up this injury. Then, with a horrifying tone, he tells him that his level won't matter when his mana core is destroyed. The assassin becomes shocked to hear this, and when he looks down, he sees Ghislaine's sword glowing. He then immediately begins to scream, as he can feel his mana scattering from his mana core. Afterward, he yells at Ghislaine, asking him if he has lost his mind since the backflow could cause an explosion and blow the whole area away. In response, Ghislaine flashes a terrifying look and tells the man that only those who are unskilled make such a mistake, but he can manage it. Witnessing the determined look on Ghislaine's face, he realizes that he is not bluffing, and he really is going to die. Just then, while screaming at the top of his voice, Frank reveals that he was sent by Count Desmond. According to the man, the Count needed a reason to start a war against the Perdium and Degard families. Hearing that, Ghislaine becomes surprised to know that it was Desmond. In his previous life, this kind of work was left for the families that allied with the ducal house, but he is enraged to know that Duke Delphine orchestrated the whole thing without being directly involved. Ghislaine then asks Frank if this is the reason he wanted to kill his sister, to which the man tells him that he is correct. Immediately after he answers, Ghislaine pushes his sword through his body, at which point Frank spits out some blood and reminds him that he promised to put his sword away. However, Ghislaine smiles when he hears this and asks the man why he is scared, when he has killed so many people himself. Frank begins to laugh when he hears this, and the next moment, the man moves close to Ghislaine and reveals to him that nothing will change even if he dies. He already finished the work of the Degard family, and asks if people will listen to a punk like him. He assures him that Perdium will perish in war, but the moment he says this, Ghislaine grabs his head and pushes it to the wall. Then, with a smile on his face, Ghislaine tells the man that he was reborn after dying and assures him, saying that things will be different this time. Immediately after he says this, his sword begins to shine brighter, whereas Frank raises his head and screams out. Soon after, the man shoots out his energy through his mouth, and it blows up when it reaches the sky, looking like a firework. The moment he does this, he falls to the ground and dies while splattering blood all over the wall. Then, he starts breathing heavily and looks around to see the corpses on the ground along with his sister's unconscious body. After confirming that there is no one next to him, Ghislaine throws his sword to the ground. He then takes a deep breath, but suddenly, he falls to the ground, coughing up blood. While wiping the blood from his mouth, Ghislaine says that it was very easy for him to explode 3 cores when he was the Mercenary King. Despite that, he pushes himself up and tells himself that he will not fall here. He then rushes to a building and kicks the door open to see 2 dead bodies inside the building. In his previous life, another body was found in this place besides Alina's, and due to what Frank said earlier, Ghislaine realizes that the body in front of him belongs to a son of the Degard family. He notices that the boy is killed along with his escort knight, so he believes that's how the 2 men are silenced and framed as Alina's killers. Ghislaine then moves their bodies, certain that a war will take place if these bodies are revealed. And the next moment, he takes out a firecracker and decides to erase the evidence. After setting the building on fire, he carries his sister and slowly walks away, assuring himself that he will never let things go as planned for his enemies. As Ghislaine walks forward, someone watches him from a tree and disappears after staring at him for a while. The scene shifts to a man reporting to his superiors, who sit at a round table, revealing that the assassination is a failure, at which the people on the round table criticize him for letting his guard down. With a nervous look, the man tells them that they failed because of Ghislaine. The men become shocked to hear this, as they cannot believe that the useless bastard of the north actually did something. Afterward, one of the men at the table reminds the spy that Ghislaine is a useless piece of trash and tells him to stop using him as an excuse. In response, the spy insists that he is completely different from the information and rumors they have about him, recalling how he dealt with their men, and tells his superiors that it was as if he was a completely different person. He then informs them that they have already taken care of the Degard family and assures them that it will not be difficult to start a territorial war, so he begs them for another chance. The men, however, tell him to shut up as they cannot believe that he failed to gather enough information on one kid, and he has pushed their plans back. Therefore, they want him to be eliminated. At that moment, someone sitting on a throne speaks up, telling them they are noisy. The man then asks the spy to explain the kind of chance he wants, to which the spy assures him that he can get rid of Ghislaine. The man asks how he plans to do this, so the spy reveals that he will arrange a duel, claiming to have the perfect opponent in mind. At that, the men at the table ask him to reveal the person, to which the spy tells them he plans to choose Cain Loges, a young but famous swordsman known for his overwhelming strength. Despite his young age, he is the epitome of strength, and he assures them that no one in the north can match Cain's power. Moreover, since Cain is Ghislaine's cousin, he is sure it won't be forced to have them meet. Hearing that, the people at the round table become speechless, whereas with a cold gaze, the mysterious man warns his subordinate that he will not be granted another chance after this, to which the spy assures him that he will not disappoint him. Moving forward, the scene shifts to the training hall of the Perdium household. Fergus excuses himself into the room and tells his master that it is already mealtime. The moment he says this, he sees something coming toward him. It is Ghislaine who places his thread on a sword next to the man, wrapping the thread around the sword and skillfully pulling it toward himself. After that, he carefully moves his sword, testing how easily he can handle the thread. As he swings his sword, Ghislaine notices the old man, whereas Fergus approaches and apologizes for interrupting his training. He then asks his master how he was able to drag the sword, to which Ghislaine shows him the thread, explaining that the technique is called mana thread, which allows him to use mana like a string. In his past life, he used this technique all the time, but at his current skill level, he needs to implode his core to use it properly because he lacks mana. However, the only way he can use mana while controlling his threads is by creating a smaller number of them. The old man becomes surprised by his master's technique, as he always believed that he trained his mana well but had never seen anything like this. Fergus cannot understand how his master created this technique with mana. He is certain that Ghislaine had no skill in mana and had not trained for a long time, so he wonders how he was able to come up with the idea to use mana like this. Ghislaine then asks if he needs something from him, to which Fergus bows and thanks his master for protecting his little sister. Ghislaine becomes surprised to see the old man thanking him, so he tells him that he only did what he should have done, and invites him to eat together. A few days later, the festival is paused, which is expected since a knight attempted to traffic the young lady. Inside the castle, Alina complains to her brother, saying that no one believes her when she tells them he saved her. She asks Ghislaine to say something to the people, to which Ghislaine assures her that it is fine, and no one will believe him either. Meanwhile, Belinda feels furious that Jamal and Philip tried to take her, convinced that the knights wanted Alina for themselves, adding that she always suspected the two men were perverts. On the other hand, Ghislaine feels relieved that his sister survived, and although he prevented the war, he knows their enemies will not give up easily. He realizes that he cannot stop them alone forever, and for that, he needs to grow his own military force. As he thinks about this, a maid enters the room, pushing a cart with their food. Ghislaine thinks that he must get involved in politics if he wants to acquire the resources he needs. The maid then places a plate in front of him, but when he opens it, he sees a single piece of potato. At that, he turns to Belinda and asks if they are having dessert first, to which she wants him to understand the dire situation they are in. Just as she says this, he hears someone screaming outside the castle. At the castle gate, a chubby, bearded man demands compensation from the Perdium household for the financial losses caused by the festival's cancellation. He is not alone, as other merchants have gathered with pitchforks, demanding compensation. They call for Ghislaine and his sister to come out and stop wasting money, whereas the guards plead with them to calm down. Meanwhile, Ghislaine looks out the window to assess the situation as he does not understand what is happening. To that, Belinda says she knew they would do this and explains their county is full of merchants who rely on festival profits. Last year's earnings were sufficient, but since the festival was cut short, the merchants are furious. Ghislaine becomes speechless hearing that and says that he never expected the county's financial situation to be so dire. Turning away from the window, he realizes he must stop the merchants before they become more aggressive. He then asks Fergus what the soldiers are doing, and orders him to send them down to control the crowd. However, Fergus reveals that they do not have any soldiers to his surprise. The old man then explains that most of their forces have been dispatched to the Forest of Monsters for reconstruction after the orc raid, at which point Ghislaine understands where they are. Later, he narrates that they are perpetually at war fighting barbarians in the north, and on the other side there is the Forest of Monsters where they can come from at any moment. Now, they have neither money nor soldiers, so he believes it to be a complete mess. He then pulls Belinda aside and tells her they need to talk, which make her confused. He reminds her that she manages his finances and orders her to use his money to pacify the merchants. At that, Belinda looks surprised and informs him that he has no money left. Ghislaine demands an explanation, to which the maid reminds him that the Count cut off his allowance because he used to spend money recklessly. Hearing that, he wonders if he doesn't have any money at all, and he cannot believe he is broke. He then asks Belinda for a loan, but she tells him she has no cash either. The scene shifts to Ghislaine looking out at the town through his window, thinking his family is in such a terrible situation and wondering what resources they actually have. He knows that without funds, he cannot accomplish anything, and even if he has knowledge of the future, it is meaningless without money, so the first step is to find a way to get rich. He wonders if there is anything on the estate that can change his situation, and while he is thinking, Ricardo barges into his room to call for him. Ghislaine becomes surprised to see the soldier breathing heavily and asks him why he is in a hurry. With a worried look on his face, Ricardo mentions that there is a problem, which is that Kane wants to see him. Hearing that, Ghislaine becomes shocked, whereas on the other side, Skaven is seen breathing heavily with a horrible bruised face. As he tries to regain his stance, his opponent delivers a heavy punch to his face, and following that, another punch lands on his chest plate, breaking through the armor and injuring the commander's chest. As soon as he takes the attack, he collapses to the ground, and at the entrance of the bar, Ghislaine arrives and sees the commander fall. Skaven calls out to his young master when he sees him, but Ghislaine flashes a grim expression. He then hears someone calling him, and when he raises his head, he sees a huge boy standing before him. It is revealed to be none other than Kane, and with a smile on his face, Kane greets his cousin. Ghislaine takes a careful look at Kane and immediately remembers his face. He is the heir of the Loges County, a territory allied with his family, and his full name is Kane Loges. As he menacingly stares at him, he recalls that at this point in time, he was his only friend and his enemy. Afterward, while Skaven shakes on the ground in pain, Kane steps down the stairs for their reunion. Ghislaine then asks Ricardo to explain the situation, to which he explains in a serious tone that he and the commander came to the tavern after receiving a report about a disturbance. When they arrived, they found Cain with his escort knight, and recognizing them, he asked if the rumors about Ghislaine were true. At that, Scavan started explaining the details of the rumors, but before he could finish, Cain grabbed his mouth and menacingly told Scavan to stop lying to the heir of Loges. That is how the idiot started beating the commander. Cain then turns to Ricardo and tells him to explain the story properly since the commander told him that Ghislaine, who has never trained in his life, defeated an orc with his bare hands and single-handedly took down the traitorous escort knights. That's why he had to give the commander a little wake-up call to knock some sense into him. Then, with a sinister smile, Cain adds that none of this would have happened if he had not lied in the first place. Hearing that, Ghislaine immediately understands why the arrogant idiot is acting this way, since Cain has always treated him like a subordinate. Every time he visited Perdium, he caused trouble, but no one could say anything because he was basically his subordinate. No one dared to look upon Cain as unlike him, who always suffered from an inferiority complex. His confidence and bold demeanor were praised as qualities befitting an heir, and because of this, he has always faced even harsher criticism. Ghislaine smiles as he recalls this, whereas Cain becomes surprised while staring at him. He never expected such a reaction as usually Ghislaine would have charged at him after receiving this much provocation. Then, the scene shifts back to several hours earlier at Loges County, where Cain listens as a spy asks him to kill Ghislaine. The boy becomes shocked by the request, but the spy assures him that the esteemed one will support his family if he succeeds in this task. In response, Cain tells the man that dealing with a punk like him is easy, but killing the heir of a country is another matter, so he doesn't know how to eliminate him. At that, the spy explains they can lure Ghislaine into a duel and make it appear as if an unfortunate accident happened due to the trivial dispute between heirs, adding that he will accompany him disguised as an escort knight to orchestrate the situation. He assures Cain that everything will go smoothly, and this is a rare opportunity, even for him. Cain then plays along with him, saying he cannot believe he has the chance to kill his own cousin, and with a smug look on his face, he tells the man they need to leave immediately. In the present, Cain wonders if the mysterious organization wants to eliminate Ghislaine because something about him has changed. Just then, he flashes a smile, and to Ghislaine's surprise, he asks what he is doing. Afterward, sitting on the stairs, he tells Ghislaine to stop standing around and bring what he has prepared for him. Hearing that, Ghislaine asks what he is talking about, to which Cain reminds him that the festival was interrupted, and they need to liven up the mood, as they always think alike when it comes to such things. With a sinister look, he asks Ghislaine if he is wrong, but Ghislaine remains unfazed, as he genuinely does not know what he is talking about. However, after a moment, he understands what he meant, recalling that Cain used to make him prepare alcohol and women whenever he visited. Back then, he complied because he did not want his giant cousin to beat him up, and because of Cain, he had to waste his precious money. Just then he remembers Belinda telling him that his father cut off his allowance because he spent money recklessly. Therefore, he suddenly realizes the answer has been in front of him all along, and his source of money is right here. While he is deep in thought, Cain suddenly calls out to him and makes him snap back to reality. Cain then impatiently tells him to bring the goods now, asking if he can't see that he is waiting. To that, Ghislaine assures him that he will, but first, he reminds him that he has a debt to repay. The spy becomes shocked to see the look in Ghislaine's eyes, whereas Cain asks to explain what he should be repaying for. Then, with a crafty smile, Ghislaine tells him that he has been taking care of everything he asked for using his own money, so he demands 1,000 gold for repayment. But Cain shockingly tells Ghislaine that everything should not even cost 100 gold. He insists that he was spending his own money to thank him for being his friend, calling it a friendship fee. However, Ghislaine asks if he is stupid, as he has always been his doormat. Therefore, he tells Cain to pay up before he beats the hell out of him, adding that he needs a lot of money right now. At that, everyone in the tavern becomes stunned, whereas Ricardo wonders what he is saying right now. Suddenly, Cain sighs and stands up, asking if he is acting bold just because he has been going easy on him. He questions if he really believes he has gotten stronger just because of a false rumor about defeating a knight, adding that he is a parasite leeching off this land. He reminds him that everyone in the north considers him a scoundrel who spouts empty nonsense. As he says this, Cain clenches his fist and tells Ghislaine to get himself together while attempting to land a punch on his face. However, Ghislaine effortlessly dodges the sudden attack by moving to the side, making everyone surprised. Cain then quickly swings his hand at his head, but Ghislaine dodges again, lowers his stance, and in the next moment, he punches Kane in the ribs. After receiving the attack, Kane fails to comprehend what is happening, as he coughs up a little bit of blood. Afterward, Ghislaine stretches out his hand and aims for his head. However, Kane manages to block it with his hand and smiles as he does so. Witnessing that, Ghislaine gets confused, but suddenly, Kane falls to his knees and screams in pain. Seeing that, the spy rushes to his side and asks if he is alright. Ghislaine then tells Kane to stop whining, as he knows he blocked the attack. However, the spy yells at him to step back, asking if he knows what he is doing. Meanwhile, the spectators in the tavern become stunned, as they cannot believe that Ghislaine actually took down Kane. Looking at the crowd's reaction, Ghislaine immediately understands his intentions. On the other hand, Kane whispers to the spy, asking if his acting was okay. With a grin, the spy assures him that his performance was perfect, adding that he has set the stage perfectly to make it seem like the fault lies with Ghislaine, so now he has enough justification to duel him. Kane thinks, of course, it's a rare opportunity to gain such powerful backing, as he must make sure to leave a lasting impression this time. Following that, he takes out a blue glove, unable to believe that he has been given the opportunity to cut off Perdium, a falling power. He then raises the glove and tells Ghislaine that he has tarnished the dignity of nobility with lies, claiming that he attacked him simply for trying to verify the truth. But before he can finish his words, Ghislaine throws his glove at him, challenging his cousin to a duel. At that, Kane becomes speechless, whereas Ghislaine tells the idiot that he insulted an heir, like him, in front of his people, and assaulted his knight, thus tarnishing the dignity of nobility. Then, with a confident smile on his face, he asks his cousin if he plans to deny the allegations. Kane smiles when he hears this, since he has always believed that he was stupid, but he never expected him to be foolish enough to dig his own grave. He then takes out his sword, and tells Ghislaine that he will accept his duel. Pointing his sword at him, he warns him not to regret it even if he dies. Ghislaine smiles upon hearing this, and calls out to Ricardo, to which the soldier immediately answers. Afterward, he orders Ricardo to bring all the merchants who are protesting in front of the castle. Then, while flashing a devious smile, he asks Ricardo to tell the merchants that he will help them make a lot of money. When the festival was cancelled suddenly, the atmosphere, which had heated up to its peak, suddenly cooled down, leaving behind some tourists who couldn't return out of regret. Ghislaine believes that the tourists must be in a state of incomplete combustion, as they were unable to spend their money or their time. In this situation, if an event were to take place right now, it might soothe them. Moving on, the scene shifts where Ghislaine and Kane stand on a stage, surrounded by a large crowd. The people seem excited to witness the duel between Ghislaine and Kane, as they bet their money on the giant guy, expecting to see Ghislaine get beaten up. Thanks to the fight, store owners reopen their shops and begin selling their items to the tourists. The chubby merchant who was protesting earlier urges everyone to place their bets, telling them to bring their money. All the merchants immediately put down their money, placing their bets on Kane, as they are certain this is a guaranteed win. Afterward, Kane places his huge sword on the ground and asks Ghislaine why he would turn a sacred duel into a marketplace. Then, with a smile on his face, he warns that his sword will not stop even if he surrenders. Meanwhile, Ghislaine is not surprised to hear this, since he already knows that Kane and his escort knight plan to kill him. Later, Ghislaine tells his cousin that enough people have gathered, and they can begin the match. The moment he says this, the spy interrupts, telling him to wait. With a smile on his face, the man declares that a proper bet cannot proceed at this rate. Everyone becomes confused hearing it, so the chubby merchant reveals to the crowd that no one bet on Duke Ghislaine. The people are not surprised because they believe only a fool would bet on him, and they all assume the outcome is obvious. Knowing this, Kane laughs and taunts Ghislaine, pointing out that even his own people doesn't trust him. Later, the chubby merchant asks the spy if they should change the nature of the bet, suggesting that they wager on how long Ghislaine can last against Kane. However, the next moment, someone drops a bag of gold on the table. The person turns out to be the commander, Scavan, who is being supported by Ricardo. He tells the merchant that he wants to bet on young master. Ghislaine smiles when he sees this, but at that moment, another person drops a huge bag of gold on top of Scavan's bag. The person is revealed to be Alina, and she announces that she wants to bet on her big brother as well. Hearing that, everyone, including Ghislaine, Scavan, Ricardo, and even the spectators, becomes shocked. Alina then asks the merchant if the money is enough, to which the man confirms that it is, whereas Belinda reminds Alina that she advised her not to do this. Meanwhile, Kane scoffs, complaining that they made him wait for no reason. Later, as the referee asks the boys to get ready, Ghislaine reminds Kane that he is older than him, pointing out that it would look strange if he made the first move. He then grabs his sword, takes it out, and challenges Cain to come at him. At that, Cain fails to understand what his cousin is thinking, but the next moment, he lowers himself and tells Ghislaine that it is too late for him to act like an older brother. The moment he says this, the referee signals the start of the fight. Immediately after hearing this, Cain jumps up and rushes to attack Ghislaine and uses his momentum to strike with his heavy sword. Ghislaine manages to block the attack but is surprised by the sheer weight of the blade. With a smile on his face, Cain tells him that he has already stooped too low to save face now. At that moment, he uses his sword hilt to push him back, then grabs his blade and swings its hilt toward his head, which Ghislaine dodges by going low. Then, he tries to kick him, but Ghislaine manages to evade the attack, making him smash the ground. Meanwhile, the spectators are shocked to witness Cain's strength, as they cannot believe that he has not even given Ghislaine a chance to attack. With a smug look on his face, Cain smiles at his cousin, while Ghislaine thinks that he never expected him to be so proud. On the other hand, Belinda begins to panic after seeing Cain's display of power, so she grabs Alina and tells her that they need to stop the fight. However, the spy smiles, as he knows that it is already too late. No matter who the opponent is, they are trapped the moment they decide to cross swords with Cain. The opponent, overwhelmed by that immense power, will become consumed by the thought that there's no chance to counterattack, and they will use up all their energy solely on evasion. In the end, the exhausted opponent, after only dodging for a while, will leave an opening. And that is when they meet their end, and that's how Cain has always won. In the meantime, Cain begins attacking Ghislaine more aggressively, while Ghislaine manages to dodge each of his attacks. He smiles when he sees this, and tells Ghislaine that he is still as slippery as ever, adding that it seems his skills have actually improved since the last time they met. The next moment, he suddenly stops attacking and turns his blade around to grab the sharp edge of the blade with his bare hands. Following that, he swings the sword hilt at him and taunts him, saying that he has always been good at running away since back in the old days, whereas Ghislaine manages to block the attack. But to his surprise, Cain uses the hilt to grab him, and the next moment, he tosses him into the air. Seeing this, everyone gets shocked, while Ricardo calls out to his young master. Meanwhile, the assassin smiles, believing that Ghislaine is finished. However, as he slowly descends back to the ground, Ghislaine says that he wanted to go easy on him, but unfortunately for the poor bastard, he has crossed the line. Ghislaine then gathers mana in his legs and carefully lands, and the moment his feet touch the ground, he charges at Cain, making him shocked by how fast he moves. Immediately after, he lands a direct attack on his stomach, to which Cain gets confused. Meanwhile, the spy fails to believe that he has returned to a stable state by condensing mana into his legs. Afterward, Ghislaine takes a deep breath and informs his cousin that his swordsmanship is ignorant, as he can tell that he believes himself to be the strongest just because his opponents get scared when he shows a little bit of strength. Then, he takes a stance and tells Cain that he will open his eyes. Hearing that, Cain becomes annoyed and rushes to attack him, asking how he is going to do that. Then, Ghislaine uses his footwork, and to Cain's surprise, he kicks his sword to push him back. Before the sword can reach him again, he jumps on Cain's arm and moves to the side to dodge. As he descends, he skillfully maneuvers in the air to strike him from his shoulder. Cain becomes annoyed by this and pushes his sword forward, but Ghislaine dodges by sidestepping. The next moment, he lands on the middle of the blade and presses his sword down with his leg. Following that, he goes for a deadly blow with a cold look in his eyes and cuts him close to his neck. The moment after, blood begins to gush from the places where he struck earlier, and witnessing that, all the spectators become shocked. The crowd then erupts into cheers, as no one expected him to show this level of skill, while some people begin to regret betting on Cain. Soon after, Alina turns to the maid, asking if she sees what is happening. Skaven smiles at the scene, and the spy becomes speechless. Then, Cain notices that his wounds are shallow, and he is certain that he could have struck deeper if he wanted, but wonders if Ghislaine did it on purpose. He cannot comprehend what is happening, as he does not understand how he has reached this level of swordsmanship. Ghislaine then glares at his cousin for a while, and to Cain's surprise, he suddenly throws his sword away. Following that, he confidently declares that the large gap in their skill will not provide enough entertainment for the people, so that's why he will fight him barehanded from now on. Cain becomes enraged by this, whereas Ghislaine explains that he wants to use this opportunity to educate him. Then, rolling up his sleeves, he tells Cain that he will be educating him with his bare knuckles. Hearing that, he gets confused, so Ghislaine explains that he is no match for him in swordsmanship. Therefore, he wants to give him a handicap, as it is better for them to have a bare-handed fight, which he excels in. With a serious look on his face, he tells his cousin that he will now add 2,000 gold, which is twice the original amount, to bet on himself to win. Everyone is shocked to hear this, as they cannot believe that he has added 2,000 gold to the initial bet. The spy is more shocked than anyone else, as he cannot believe that he actually dares to challenge Kane to a bare-handed fight, as he never thought he'd see the day he'd be thankful for his insanity, so he believes that the fortune is still on their side. Before the fight begins, the chubby merchant asks everyone to place their additional bets, announcing that the event is now a bare-handed fight between young Master Ghislaine and Kane. Some people believe that Ghislaine is foolish for challenging Kane to a fight that relies on sheer force, so they place their bets on Kane. But others trust that Ghislaine knows what he is doing and bet on him instead. Meanwhile, Kane cannot believe that his cousin actually wants to fight him with his bare hands, and he makes him laugh. Then, he tells Ghislaine to do as he pleases, and the next moment, he grabs his weapon and throws away his coat. Afterward, he raises his sword high, and declares that he will still use the sword, and the moment he says this, he rushes to attack him. Belinda is annoyed to see this, so she calls out to her master, urging him to pick up his sword and defeat the bastard. However, the moment she says this, Kane swings his sword at him with the intent to kill. Seeing this, Ghislaine smiles and realizes that he needs to knock some sense into him. Then, he ducks to dodge his attack. Following that, Kane quickly tries to move his sword closer to cut him, but Ghislaine swiftly moves to the side and punches him in the leg. Before Kane can react, Ghislaine lands a heavy punch to his jaw and makes blood spill out of his mouth. The attack makes him lose his balance, and he quickly falls to the ground, struggling to stand up. He then fails to comprehend what is happening, since he does not understand how a loser like Ghislaine is able to display such movements. Meanwhile, the crowd erupts in screams as they witness their young master fight, and they begin to understand that young master might actually win. On the contrary, with a cold look on his face, Ghislaine orders his cousin to get up, telling him that he has not even gotten started. Kane, who's annoyed by this, raises his sword and rushes to attack him again. As he swings his huge sword, Ghislaine easily dodges the attacks. He grabs his cousin's arms, twists them, and locks him down, while Kane thinks that he couldn't even look him straight in the eyes until now, and he used to bow down on his own whenever he showed up. Before he can do anything, Ghislaine uses his knee to deliver a blow to his ribs. At that, the poor boy spits out some blood, knowing that he has to kill him to secure their Logis family's future. However, he gets no time to rest, as Ghislaine pounds him relentlessly, not stopping for a moment. He beats the trash out of him, and by the time he finally stops, Kane's face and entire body are already swollen. The boy trembles in front of him, but Ghislaine grabs his hair and tells him that he pities his father. He explains to his cousin that Count Logis helped Perdium until he was on the verge of demise, as he was friends with his father. But unfortunately, his son had a different idea in his mind. Upon hearing this, Kane remembers something from a few years ago. In a flashback, he is seen arguing with his father, as he cannot believe that his father wants to send more support to the Perdium country, reminding him that their own territory is struggling as well, asking why he continues to invest in a land that is withering away. It is like pouring water into a cracked bucket. He reminds the Count that it has not even been a week since he returned, and yet he is already planning to leave again to help Perdium. Kane pleads with his father not to leave. Everyone's trying to stop him. He asks why he insists on helping Perdium. Count Logis turns around and tells his son that he is doing all of this because they are friends. Back in the present, as soon as Kane recalls this memory, he sees Ghislaine's fist coming close to his face. Out of fear, he closes his eyes, but the blow never comes. Ghislaine then tells his cousin that he has done enough, and when Kane opens his eyes, he sees his outstretched hand in front of him and tells him to get up. So lowering his head, he tells Ghislaine that he accepts his defeat. At that, everyone on the stage, including the audience and the spy, becomes speechless. The crowd then erupts in chants of their young master's name, as they cannot believe that he actually won. And as some people regret betting on Kane, others are grateful that they bet on Ghislaine. Alina is overjoyed to see that her big brother won, while Belinda and the two soldiers stand in shock, unable to believe their master's victory. Then, the spy gets on the stage and calls out to Kane, moving closer and yelling at him. He wants to know why he accepted defeat so early just because he had a little bit of a disadvantage, adding that he trusted him. But Kane ignores him and simply tells him to let go, as he is done. At that, the spy becomes annoyed, realizing he chose a weak brat. While he is lost in thought, Ghislaine suddenly calls out to him, and with a smile on his face, he tells the man that he gotta do what he gotta do. The spy is surprised as he does not know what he is talking about. Ghislaine then turns to his people and calls for their attention, announcing that the man here is volunteering to pay for all the meat and drinks for everyone gathered here. Hearing this, the spy gets shocked, whereas the people are quite happy with what their young master says, cheering and telling Ghislaine that he is the best. However, the spy protests, telling him that he did not agree to this, and asks him to withdraw his statement. Just then, Ghislaine places his hand on his shoulder and explains that this is the price he has to pay for losing the duel, and clarifies that this money will not be deducted from the bet. He reminds him to add 2,000 gold to the original 1,000 gold bet. With a horrifying look on his face, he warns the spy that he already knows what will happen if he tries to run. Seeing the expression on his face, the spy gives up. He knows that if he does something foolish, he is as good as dead, so he falls to his knees and accepts his request. The next day, the scene shifts inside Ghislaine's room, where he places a huge box on his table, and when he opens it, he sees a large amount of gold coins inside, which is the money he made from his bet. He never expected the amount to be so much, and he is certain that with this money, he could hire a small mercenary corps. Ghislaine understands that it takes a lot of time to make more money, but he is also certain that their enemies will not wait for him, so he must prepare faster in order to start the business he has in mind. While he is deep in thought, he notices Alina and Belinda standing next to him. With a nervous look on his face, he asks if something is wrong. In response, Alina flashes a bright smile and asks her elder brother where does he plans on spending all that money. Ghislaine asks if she wants some money, but the girl simply tells him that she is just asking. Belinda, however, smirks and tells Alina that she already knows where he will spend it. She reminds her that Lady Amelia's birthday is coming soon, so she asks if he put up this entire show just to buy Amelia an expensive gift. She teases him, saying that he is so transparent, but Alina gasps, unable to believe that her brother is working so hard just to look good in front of his fiancée. However, Ghislaine gets stunned to hear this, as he cannot believe that he has a fiancée. He then asks his maid and his sister in confusion if he really has a fiancée. Belinda teases her master, telling him not to be shy, as he doesn't need to play dumb just because he is embarrassed that they know what he is thinking, while Alina reminds her brother that they are talking about Amelia from the Rayfolds family. Hearing that, his expression turns grim as he remembers his fiancée, and he remembers her as a spider. He narrates that Amelia Rayfold is a noble among nobles, who is known for her kind nature and actions that transcend social class. But later, she will lead a rebellion and come to be known as the Witch of the North. And, together with the Duke of Delphine, she sings the hymn of Perdium's downfall, so he recalls the girl as a traitor. A smile forms on his face as he thinks about this, and then he asks Belinda when their father will return, to which the maid tells him that the Lord will be back in a week. Ghislaine realizes that a week is enough time for him, so he stands up and tells Belinda that he will be visiting Rayfold Estate. But Belinda mentions it is not even the lady's birthday yet, and asks him for the reason behind his visit. In response, Ghislaine reveals that he wants to collect the money. Then, the scene shifts, and we see a beautiful noble lady placing her shoes on the ground. The lady has a spider next to her mouth and striking red eyes. She asks someone to put her shoes on her. The person turns out to be a poor little girl in rags, and she cannot believe that Lady Amelia is giving her shoes. Amelia tells the girl that she is the only one who deserves to walk barefoot on the land. Then, she turns to her soldiers and orders them to provide food and shelter to the people in the area. Immediately after hearing this, the soldiers begin distributing provisions, while the people are shocked to witness such generosity. As Amelia and her soldiers walk away, the crowd thanks her for what she has done. Then the scene shifts again, taking us to Amelia's garden at the Rayfold Manor. We see a man cleaning her feet who is revealed to be Bernaf, who is her bodyguard. While petting her cat, Amelia reveals to her knight that her father has always demanded absolute obedience from the people of his territory. And according to her, the common folk will always follow those who keep them warm and well fed. Bernaf tells his mistress that she has now won the hearts of the people, and assures her that her kind nature will be favorable in the upcoming future successor competition. The moment she hears this, she uses her leg and hit his face. She asks him to tell her what happened in the duel against the finest sword of the north, to which Bernaf apologizes to his mistress, explaining that he wanted to avoid unnecessary attention, as people will start paying attention to her if he wins the duel. As he gently touches her feet, he reminds Amelia that it is not time for her to show her claws yet. He then tells her that his blade belongs to her. In response, Amelia says that she has invested so much into him. She lifts his head and moves closer to him, and with a scary look on her face, she warns Bernaf that he is not allowed to be weak. Then, she asks how things are progressing with the Merchants Guild, to which Burnaf assures her that she does not need to worry about the Arctium Guild. They have been buying all the materials used for the reconstruction of the Forest of Beasts outpost, which was recently destroyed by the orc attack in Perdium. In other words, they're reclaiming all the support funds that Count Rayfold sends to Perdium each year. He also tells her that they are recruiting all the soldiers and knights leaving Perdium, and many of these soldiers are well trained from battles against the barbarian tribes, making them excellent assets. At that, Amelia commends her knight on his success, reminding him to always maintain the appearance of an ordinary merchant guild. Until they are fully prepared, their identity must never be exposed. While they are talking, a steward interrupts them, requesting to excuse him. Burnaf stands up and tells the man that the mistress is resting, and asks who gave him permission to step into the garden, to which the steward explains that he has just received news from the gate that His Highness, Ghislaine Perdium, has arrived. Amelia becomes surprised to hear this, so she asks the steward why he has come. At that, the steward begins to stutter as he tells them that he said he has something to discuss regarding their merchant guild. Then, the scene shifts to the reception room. Meanwhile, holding a small flower, Ghislaine greets her. Amelia says how rude of him to barge in unannounced, scolds him for coming without prior notification, and asks if he has not yet learned manners or etiquette. But with a smile on his face, Ghislaine tells the girl that he wants to give her a gift in advance because her birthday is coming soon. Then, he places the flower he is holding on the table and explains that he got it from the Merchant Guild up ahead, adding that the fragrance is quite nice, and he plans to buy flowers from the guild from now on. The next moment, to everyone's surprise, he reveals that the guild is known as the Arctium Merchant Guild. Amelia cannot comprehend what he is thinking, so she stands up and tells him that she does not know what he is talking about. She turns around and tells Ghislaine that she will be leaving now that she has received his gift. However, with a cold gaze in his eyes, Ghislaine asks to sit down. Amelia gets shocked to feel the energy he is releasing, and she cannot believe that the boy who used to barely speak in front of her is now exuding such powerful aura. Ghislaine then picks up the tea in front of him and tells Amelia that he does not want to waste her time, revealing that he needs some money and asks to give him 10,000 gold. Hearing this, Amelia gets irritated, as she cannot believe that he has visited her out of nowhere and is asking for such a large sum of money from his fiancée, to which Ghislaine assures her that his father has nothing to do with this and asks to simply give it to him. Besides, with a smile on his face, he tells her that he knows she never planned to marry him. Amelia gets shocked to hear this, whereas he tells her that it will be bad for her if word gets out that she is secretly building up her power, especially when the succession fight is so fierce. The moment Ghislaine says this, Amelia's cat jumps onto the table and growls at him, while Amelia tells him that his joke is not funny. At that, Ghislaine assures her, saying that he will keep her secret for a little while, but warns that his lips might be loose if he leaves the room empty-handed. So in response, with a smile on her face, Amelia assures him that it won't happen. Then, she calls for Burnaf, and the knight opens the door and steps into the room, placing his hand on his chest as he greets Ghislaine. Meanwhile, Ghislaine remembers Burnaf as a knight who has always stayed by her side. He recalls that even back then, he possessed skills on par with the Northern Swordmaster. He then explains to Amelia that a war will break out if he dies here, and asks if she can handle it. However, according to Amelia, a reckless troublemaker stormed in and was killed by the bodyguard, and the world will know it that way. Afterward, with a sinister smile on her face, she orders Burnaf to kill Ghislaine. In response, the knight draws his sword and says he will do as she commands. Witnessing that, Ghislaine flashes a smirk and thinks that if she is going to go that far, then he has no choice but to get a little serious too. Moving on, Burnaf and Ghislaine both place their hand on the sword hilt, ready for battle. However, before the beginning of the battle, Burnaf flashes a smirk, which Ghislaine finds odd. Just then, he becomes alerted hearing a sound coming behind him, and soon after, an assassin jumps out from one of the knight armors decorated in the room. The assassin then stabs into Ghislaine's chair, but fortunately, he manages to jump out just in time and goes low. Afterward, as the assassin struggles to pull out his sword, Ghislaine skillfully delivers a heavy kick to his chest and sends him flying. The impact results in him crashing through the window and shattering the glass. Witnessing that, Amelia and Burnaf become shocked, whereas Ghislaine turns to them, saying he cannot believe that they are feigning politeness while launching a surprise attack. He then picks up his sword and dashes at Burnaf, telling them that their hospitality is quite poor. Immediately after, Ghislaine launches a strong blow, but Burnaf manages to block the attack. Then, making a menacing expression, Ghislaine asks if Raphel does not know of chivalry. In response, Bernaf apologizes, reminding him that he was the first to be rude to Amelia, and it is inconsiderate to arrive unannounced and unsettle his mistress. He then grabs Ghislaine's sword and locks it in his arms, telling him that there is no need to be polite to someone like him in the first place. Following that, he attempts a quick stab at Ghislaine, but he easily dodges the blow despite his sword being locked in Bernaf's arms. He then jumps up in the air while shifting his body, and after gathering some mana in his legs, he immediately kicks Bernaf back to create some space between them. At that, Bernaf thinks he had heard rumors that Ghislaine was all talk with no skill to back his words, but it seems like he is no rookie. Afterward, Amelia asks Bernaf why he is struggling against a punk like that, at which he starts sweating. Then, with an intimidating expression, she orders Bernaf to bring her his head if he really considers himself her sword. Upon hearing this, Bernaf takes a stance, saying he won't disappoint her. Then, he exudes his vicious mana and menacingly tells Ghislaine to come forth. At that, Ghislaine smilingly asks if he, a mere escort knight, dares to order him around. In reply, Bernaf tells him that he is actually doing him a favor, and putting one foot forward, he mentions that he will do as he wishes. Just then, to Ghislaine's surprise, Bernaf appears in front of him in an instant while swinging his sword. Ghislaine barely manages to dodge the attack by shifting his body to the right. However, even though he avoids the full attack, Bernaf still leaves a cut on his face because of how fast he is. The next moment, Bernaf launches a series of attacks, but Ghislaine manages to block each of them while slowly backing off. On the other hand, Amelia becomes stunned witnessing them, wondering how a lousy punk like him actually fighting on equal footing with Bernaf. But despite this, she flashes a confident smile. Meanwhile, Ghislaine blocks another one of Bernaf's attacks, and the next moment, he locks the knight's sword down using the hilt and moves his own blade close to his neck. However, before the strike reaches him, Bernaf moves his sword back and locks his weapon with his arm. Then, he immediately begins to launch another attack, but Ghislaine dodges the attack and smiles when he sees the same move as before. Afterward, he jumps and attempts to create distance between them the same way he did earlier, but unfortunately, he feels something different this time. The kick indeed made contact with him, but the impact got significantly reduced due to Bernaf's body being strengthened with mana. Then, he tells Ghislaine that his trick will not work twice, and upon clarifying this, he slams him to the ground and quickly moves into attack. However, before Bernaf connects his attack, Ghislaine pushes his sword away with his mana-enhanced leg, and then he stylishly jumps back to create distance between them. After getting to a safe distance, he realizes that Bernaf is enduring this because of his mana. After that, Bernaf approaches Ghislaine while admitting that he is completely different from what he heard, and one never truly knows their opponent until they have fought them firsthand. He can tell that his swordsmanship is not something he has learned systematically, but looks like something picked up through real combat experiences, so he asks if he has fought with the barbarians so often that he naturally adopted their style. He then throws away his sword, telling him that his method might work on a chaotic battlefield, but not against him. Afterward, with a smug smile, he declares that his deviation ends here. On the other hand, Ghislaine breathes heavily and acknowledges that things are getting difficult. The narrow and precise thrusts of his blade, which constantly target his head, disrupt his sense of distance and timing. While at close range, the difference in size makes it difficult for him to overcome him with technique alone. In the first place, Bernaf is not someone he should have tried to take on just yet. Despite that, he raises his hand, revealing a mana thread attached to it, and tells Bernaf that he does not have much time left either. Just then, he pulls the thread, and as it passes through Bernaf, he notices that it is mana thread. However, before he can react, Ghislaine pulls back the sword to use its hilt and strike the back of his head. Then, as he loses his balance from the sudden attack, Ghislaine moves in close by stepping on his leg and delivers a heavy knee strike to his face. After receiving the attack, Bernaf bleeds from his nose and fails to comprehend what just happened. In the next moment, Amelia warns Bernaf to look out as Ghislaine jumps in the air and raises his sword to deal a heavy blow. However, Bernaf surprisingly blocks the attack, and following that, he uses his full force to push him back. Upon impact, Ghislaine rolls on the ground, but still manages to maintain his stance. Then, seeing how the fight is going, Bernaf tells his lady to get out of here. He adds that he cannot guarantee her safety, and with a serious expression, he states that he will have to start fighting at his full strength. On the other hand, Ghislaine flashes a smirk and tells him that this is exactly what he wants to see. Then, with a cold gaze, he mentions that he has not met such an entertaining opponent in a long time. Moving forward, Amelia runs through the castle while holding her cat, and becomes annoyed thinking about how daring Ghislaine is to cause her such terrible humiliation. She then wonders who leaked the information about the Merchant Guild to a madman like Ghislaine, and it is impossible for him to know so much detail if not for that. Afterward, she thinks about the rumors of him slaying orcs and saving his younger sister from assassins, and that judging by his past, she believed it must have been luck or exaggerated information. But there is a possibility that it might have been true. Then, as she reaches a corner, she wonders what the guards she stationed in advance are doing. However, when she looks around, she sees her guards lying on the ground, and in the middle of them stands a woman in a hood. As the woman turns around, she is revealed to be Belinda, and she smiles at Amelia, telling her that it has been a while since they last met. Meanwhile, Amelia becomes shocked to see the maid and asks what she is doing there. However, the moment she asks this question, Belinda appears behind her with a blade to her neck and asks her to keep quiet. Then, as Amelia fails to comprehend what is happening, Belinda removes the spider, saying she can't believe that she still has this unpleasant spider on her lips. Afterward, she flashes a mischievous smile and reveals that she eavesdropped on a conversation between Count Perdium and Count Rayfold during the engagement ceremony, which is that her siblings picked on her for having creepy spiders around, so she raised the spiders herself and took her revenge. She then mentions that she doesn't know if it is to overcome trauma or if it is a display of self-assertion. But as she throws the spider on the floor, she tells her that it does not suit her. The moment after saying this, she crushes the insect with her leg and asks Amelia to cooperate with her. Meanwhile, as the battle between Ghislaine and Bernaf continues, Ghislaine notices that the air is heavy, and it is due to the overwhelming amount of mana he is releasing. Bernaf then remembers that Ghislaine referred to him as an entertaining opponent, so he informs him that only a lowly mercenary would say such a thing, and that he cannot believe he is calling himself a noble like his mistress. In response, Ghislaine says he is also a noble, adding that he doesn't think this is something a mere escort knight like himself should say. Upon hearing this, Bernaf becomes silent for a while, but the next moment he rushes to attack, which Ghislaine manages to block. Then, with a serious expression, he tells Ghislaine not to disgrace the nobility, and the next moment, he begins attacking even faster. Ghislaine, however, manages to block the first round of attacks due to quick reaction, but gets forced to dodge the next 3 consecutive strikes. Then, as he backs off, he becomes surprised, thinking how fiercely Bernaf is pushing forward. However, the next moment, he swings his sword, saying he has had enough. Then, using his sword, he pushes his blade aside, and following that, he changes the trajectory of the sword to pierce the knight's head. Bernaf, on the contrary, intercepts the attack with his own sword, and by bending Ghislaine's sword, he pushes him back. He then tells Ghislaine that he has just used his final attack, and while saying this, he thrusts his sword at him. After his blade lands on Ghislaine's body, blood splatters on the floor, but to his surprise, he realizes that Ghislaine braced himself for the injury and used his shoulder to push the blade away. Afterward, seizing the opportunity, Ghislaine quickly counterattacks, but Bernaf manages to block it. He then tells him that he can never let his guard down until the very end, and the moment after, he pushes Ghislaine's sword aside and locks it down, then uses his mana-infused leg to kick him away. At that moment, he informs Ghislaine that this is the difference between him and a person who wields a sword for entertainment. After getting kicked away, Ghislaine stabilizes himself, and while breathing heavily, he thinks about how entertaining the fight is. From what he has seen, with overwhelming speed, range, and consecutive attacks, he controls the flow of the fight, and any attempt to counter him in close quarters through grappling is instantly shut down. Therefore, in a binding clash, he makes it seem like their swords are locked together, making him believe that they cannot be separated. Then, as Bernaf charges at him, he thinks that with his current mana, it is impossible for him to counter his strength, if he is referring to the mana he has at this moment, that is. Following that, he holds his sword and feels ashamed that he has to end the fight here. Then, as he takes a stance, he mentions there is one thing he has overlooked, which is his unique mana cultivation technique. Soon after, he unleashes the explosive mana in his third core and charges at the knight. The moment their swords touch, Ghislaine skillfully pushes Bernaf's weapon away with sheer strength, and knocks it out of his hand. Meanwhile, Bernaf becomes shocked as he fails to understand how Ghislaine can wield such explosive mana during combat. However, as soon as Ghislaine is about to pierce Bernaf's head, someone asks him to stop. After he stops right in time, the person is revealed to be Amelia, and with tearful eyes, she orders Ghislaine to take the 10,000 gold and get out of her sight. However, Ghislaine feels irritated upon hearing this and adds that it would have been better if she had simply handed over the money when he asked nicely. To that, Belinda tells her master what he has done is a bit too much to call a lover's quarrel, but Ghislaine assures her that they simply had a difference in opinion. Afterward, he walks up to Amelia and mentions that he has some unfortunate news for her. Then, resting his sword on his shoulder, he announces that the fee has now gone up to 20,000 gold. Moving forward, remembering about 2 defeated soldiers and the mess created by Ghislaine, Amelia smashes a vase on the floor out of anger. At the same time, standing next to her, Bernaf apologizes for his failure, explaining that he is quite strong and different from the rumors, and mentions that he managed to emit mana that surpassed that of an advanced level knight. Hearing that, Amelia flashes a menacing expression and states that Ghislaine has changed. Bernaf then asks if she wants to report this change to the Delphine Duchy, but the moment she hears this, she slaps him on his cheek. Then, she grabs his shirt and demands that he watch his mouth, asking if he truly does not understand how terrifying Duke Delphine is. She adds that the reason she secretly allied herself with Duke Delphine without her father's knowledge is because of a covert agreement, where he promised to support the rebellion she would lead in exchange for her assistance in bringing down Perdium, so her siblings will kill her the moment the agreement is exposed. Then, with a menacing expression, Amelia states that Ghislaine might also know about the agreement, since he already knows the secret of the Merchant Guild, so she tells Bernaf that they need to do whatever it takes to kill Ghislaine, to which he replies that he understands. She then asks about the state of Ghislaine's body, so Bernaf mentions that he managed to leave light injuries on many parts of his body, and a heavy wound on his shoulder. Also, he believes that he will likely not be in the best condition for a while due to the explosive amount of mana he used. However, he informed that they cannot use knights from their land in order to avoid leaving any traces, to which Amelia assures him that she is aware. Then, she reminds him that this is exactly why she trained a certain group of people, and hearing that, Bernaf immediately understands what she is referring to and asks if she intends to use the Wildcats. According to Amelia, the Wildcats traffickers consist of war orphans, those without kin, and those without status. Soon after, she places a flag on the map and instructs him to assemble a dozen of them, and to only use those proficient in mana, whereas Bernaf quickly realizes why she is sending the Wildcats to that location. The ravine is the only narrow path from Rayfold territory to Perdium County, making it an ideal place for quietly handling things, as the area is remote and the terrain is tight. He then makes a determined face and assures his mistress that he will prepare the Wildcats. Meanwhile, with a furious expression, Amelia vows to make Ghislaine pay for the humiliation he inflicted on her. On the other side, as Ghislaine travels inside his carriage to go home, he wraps a cloth around his injured arm. Immediately after, he senses something and wonders if it is Amelia's doing. Fergus then asks if he is alright, to which Ghislaine assures him that he is fine, and it's nothing serious. Afterward, he checks the condition of his body and finds the wounds are not deep, considering that he went a little overboard. The 20,000 gold he received from Amelia is enough to cover the base funds needed to rebuild their territory, so it is like receiving a few years' worth of savings. He wanted to kill Amelia as well, but doing so would have caused an unavoidable war, and he knows that he cannot risk the safety of his territory over a momentary whim. Moreover, Perdium is already struggling to deal with the barbarians, so it is smarter for him to back off for now. He also knows that his knowledge of the Arctium Merchant Guild will put enough pressure on Amelia, and for that, he promises to make good use of her this time. Meanwhile, Belinda notices the confidence in his expression and senses something, so she asks if things are going exactly as he planned. She then reminds him that he told her to subdue the guards once she heard fighting inside, and she also recalls that he asked her to take Amelia hostage once she came out of the room. However, he corrects her, stating that he actually asked Fergus to handle those tasks. The moment he says this, a sharp pain surges through his body. Witnessing that, Belinda and the old man quickly stand up in alarm as he coughs up blood. Then, Ghislaine immediately realizes that the pain is from the recoil of opening his third core. And though the pain is still better than what he felt last time, it is clear that it will continue to be a troublesome side effect every time he uses his power. Later, as he thinks that he needs to find a way to increase his mana, Belinda suddenly grabs his hand. She then takes out a huge needle covered in mana and tells him that the flow of his mana is a mess. Soon after, she uses the needle to hit different parts of his hand in quick succession. Ghislaine becomes shocked to see this, but the next moment, he feels something inside his body. And when he opens his mouth, he exhales a lot of air. Then, he looks at his hand and becomes surprised to see that his entangled mana road has opened up a bit. But he is certain that this is a method that cannot be used without a deep understanding of mana. He thought that Belinda was an ordinary maid since it was his mother who brought her into the family. However, he does not know her true identity, nor does he understand why such a skilled individual is working as a head maid in the countryside. But he believes that having many skilled people in their territory is a good thing, especially the people he has encountered so far are only the beginning. After that, Belinda assures him that she will help him with anything because she trusts him unconditionally, so she requests him to tell her why he took such a huge amount of money from Amelia. In response, Ghislaine tells her that he needs to spend money, and Amelia is the only rich person he knows. Belinda becomes shocked to hear this, so she yells at him, saying she cannot believe that he broke off his engagement for this reason, and warns him that he will be in trouble once Count Rayfold finds out about it. But Ghislaine assures her that Amelia will never tell her father about it. Then, with a smile on his face, he reminds Belinda that she said she trusts him, to which she demands to know what he plans to spend the money on, as she took the risk with him. In response, Ghislaine surprises her by revealing that he wants to spend the money on the Forest of Beasts, and adds that he will pioneer it. Hearing that, Fergus reminds him that development has been attempted there ever since his great-grandfather's time. But Ghislaine interrupts him, asking if he remembers the request he made before they entered the castle. Fergus becomes nervous when he hears this, but the next moment he mentions that the person he asked him to find is indeed at the location he mentioned. However, he is not confident in his condition. To that, Ghislaine tells Fergus everything is fine as long as the man is alive and orders that they need to go there right now. But Belinda protests, reminding him that they need to return home, and he cannot afford to wander around in his current condition. Ghislaine, however, asks if she truly believes that Amelia will let them go easily after what they have done, thinking that he knows that the crazy girl will try to kill him to silence him. Belinda then taps her shoulder confidently and assures him that she is good at fighting and also reminds that Fergus is a knight, to which Ghislaine tells her that she is not suited for the role he has in mind, as this is a different field. Then, he flashes a crafty smile and reveals that he needs a vanguard, and that's why they are on their way to meet that very person. Moving forward, the group arrives at a wooden house next to a forest and knocks on the door. Meanwhile, Belinda observes the worn-down structure and comments that it looks abandoned, whereas Fergus mentions that the address says it's here. Some moments later, a massive, ragged old man with long, unkempt hair opens the door. Squinting at them, he gruffly asks who they are, and on the other hand, everyone except Ghislaine becomes shocked to see the man. Afterward, Belinda moves closer to her master and whispers, asking if this is truly the person he spoke of, and notes that the man does not look like he is in any condition to fight. But Ghislaine assures her that they are in the right place. The man then quickly assesses Ghislaine and assumes that he is a bored noble, so without hesitation, he turns his back on them and tells them to get lost. But before he can retreat inside, Ghislaine calls out to him and refers to him as the ex-captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries, Gillian. Hearing that, Gillian freezes, his body stiffens, and he quickly turns around, eyes filled with shock. On the contrary, Ghislaine extends his hand and says that he really missed him. Afterward, the group becomes shocked to hear that this man is the former captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. The Ratatosk mercenaries are a group that only those who have mastered most weapons can join. And although they no longer exist, their bravery is such that any knight, even in foreign lands, is bound to hear their name at least once, and the leader of this mercenary group is Gillian. Later, without wasting any time, Gillian throws an axe at Ghislaine. However, the axe only cuts his jacket and misses his body by a hair as if it was to threaten him. The group becomes alerted to see this, so they quickly take out their weapons and stand in front of their master. On the other hand, with a menacing expression, Gillian asks Ghislaine to state his business. Belinda then requests Ghislaine to stand back, adding that the old man is not in the right state of mind. Just then, out of nowhere, Ghislaine mentions something called the eternal punishment to the man and piques his interest. He then reveals that he knows the cure to the incurable disease his daughter is suffering from, and calmly asks if he feels like talking. Moving on, Ghislaine narrates that high fever, coughing up blood, and red spots blooming like flower petals on the skin. And since the sight of the patient writhing in pain resembles a prisoner under punishment, that is why they call it eternal punishment. Then, as the group steps inside Gillian's house, his daughter screams on the bed, whereas Gillian holds her daughter, calling her Rachel. On the other hand, while staring at the girl, Ghislaine realizes that it is not too late. In his past life, he tried searching for Gillian to recruit him, But he was no longer of the world by the time he found him, as he had given up on everything and ended his own life as soon as his daughter passed away. Due to the condition of his house, he can tell that Gillian has already sold all his assets to treat his daughter, leaving behind only weapons. On the other hand, Rachel screams at her father, telling him that the pain is too much and begs him to kill her. Meanwhile, realizing that he cannot waste any more time, Ghislaine takes off his jacket and tells Gillian that he will start the treatment right away. However, before he can do anything, Belinda places her hand on his shoulder, requesting him to go back with her. She then adds that although she does not know what he is trying to do, this is not a problem he can solve with his strength, explaining that the disease is so severe that even priests cannot cure it and instead call it a punishment from God. However, he pushes her hand aside and firmly tells her that he heal her. Seeing her worry for him, Ghislaine turns around and reminds her that she promised to trust him. Remembering her own words, Belinda falls silent, whereas Ghislaine takes out a paper and gives it to her, asking her to purchase all the medicinal herbs on the list and bring them back. Surprised to see what is on the list, Belinda quickly gets the items and returns after a short while. Ghislaine then narrates that for wandering mercenaries without a home, knowledge is directly tied to survival. Although the eternal punishment is an incurable disease right now, a cure will later be discovered in the future, becoming a widely discussed topic, especially since the method is relatively simple. The only problem, however, is the exorbitant cost of ingredients, with the fairy's blessing being a crucial component for the cure. The first step is to finely chop the fairy's blessing and the herbs, pack them tightly into a bottle, and pour distilled alcohol over them. Next, the mixture must be shaken thoroughly and left to sit for a while. Once that is done, the remaining ingredients need to be added and stirred until the mixture is complete. When he finishes, Ghislaine stretches out his hand and instructs Gillian to give his daughter the purple glowing liquid and have her drink it. With no other choice, Gillian quickly feeds his daughter the liquid while holding on to her. The moment she swallows it, the red spots on her face slowly begin to disappear, and her facial expression changes, leaving everyone in shock. They cannot believe what they are witnessing as the once incurable symptoms fade before their eyes. More shocked than anyone, Gillian stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend that the medicine really worked. Ghislaine, however, calmly states that it worked just as he expected. Then, with a nervous look, Gillian asks him how he did it, telling him that even holy power could not cure her. In response, Ghislaine mentions that the priest's divine power is not omnipotent, rather, it enhances the body's vitality and strengthens a person's regenerative abilities to help them overcome illness, but it is fundamentally different from a true cure. Hearing that, Gillian's hands begin to tremble as he grabs him and asks if his daughter can truly be cured. In reply, he assures the man that she will recover in a couple of months. Shocked to hear this, Gillian steps back and bows his head to him. Understanding that he must have a reason for seeking him out in such a remote place, Gillian asks what he wants from him. He knows that someone wouldn't go to such lengths without expecting something in return, so he tells Ghislaine that all he has left is his useless body. However, with a serious look, he declares that he will become his slave or his dog if that is what he commands. To that, Ghislaine calmly assures him that he does not need any of those things, but what he wants is the captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. Meanwhile, when Gillian raises his head, he sees something shocking, which is that he has the eyes of a dreamer. The man then stands up, picks up an axe, and, without hesitation, cuts off his very long ponytail. The group becomes alarmed as they watch him, for without his ponytail, he looks completely different as he appears more alive and powerful than ever before. Gillian then moves toward his weapons and asks Ghislaine if there is anyone besides the people in the room who has come with him, or if there is anyone who might come looking for him, to which Ghislaine replies that he is here with his group. Afterward, Gillian grabs a spear and wraps a rope around it, asking if he has anyone who holds a grudge against him, so in response, Ghislaine admits that he does and explains that he will have even more enemies in the future. Then, without another word, Gillian grabs the rope's end and throws the spear outside his house, shattering the wooden wall. The spear flies into the forest in front of the house, and a moment later, he pulls it back using the rope. When the spear returns to the house, everyone sees that Gillian has hit his target, which is an assassin. The spear struck the assassin directly in the chest, and as the injured man struggles to remove it, Gillian strides over, grabs him by the neck, and demands to know who sent him. The wildcat, still in shock, tries to comprehend how Gillian managed to find him. Then, turning to Ghislaine, Gillian asks what he wants to do with the captured assassin, but Ghislaine simply replies that he already knows who sent him. Afterward, placing his hand on his sword, he mutters that he had not wanted to use his hands for this, but before he can draw his blade, Gillian places a hand on his hilt to stop him. He then flashes a bright smile and tells Ghislaine to leave it to him. Following that, he snaps the assassin's neck with his bare hands, and the moment after, he bows to Ghislaine. Meanwhile, Belinda becomes shocked by how he showed no hesitation and cannot understand why Ghislaine would want to recruit such a dangerous person. On the other hand, Gillian falls to his knees and solemnly pledges his life to Ghislaine. Then, realizing that he has just gained a crucial piece for his upcoming reconstruction plan, Ghislaine smiles and tells Gillian that he looks forward to working with him. Moving on, inside a cabin in the woods, a wildcat trafficker reports to the rest of the members that a reconnaissance unit has been killed. Hearing that, the wildcat's member becomes shocked, and they believe it to be foolish. As they all talk among themselves, someone in a higher position suddenly demands to lower their voices, and that person is revealed to be Viego. At that, the traffickers quickly apologize by calling him captain for raising their voices. The captain then explains to his subordinate that Bernaf said Ghislaine wouldn't be able to find the reconnaissance unit, and it would be impossible for him to kill them, so he asks whether the reconnaissance unit is incompetent, or if they were given the wrong intel. In response, the subordinate hesitates before revealing that Gillian has joined the team, causing Viego to be momentarily stunned. He then abruptly stands up and grabs his teammate's neck, and with a terrifying expression, he demands to know if the information is certain. At that, the Wildcat member trembles in fear as he assures his captain that it is, insisting that he saw it with his own eyes. Hearing that, Viego excitedly thinks that his former captain is finally making a move. On the other side, Gillian is seen riding a carriage through the woods. Inside the carriage, Belinda makes an annoyed expression and states that she feels suffocated by the crowded space. She then complains to Ghislaine about the excessive number of weapons Gillian has brought along and asks if he really needed to bring so many weapons, adding that they had to buy another carriage just to transport Gillian's weapons. However, Ghislaine calmly explains that they already needed a second carriage to comfortably bring Rachel, so he believes it is fine. He then mentions that Gillian has a purpose for the weapons and requests her to bear with it for now. More importantly, he reminds her that their priority is escaping the rift. Belinda then shifts the conversation, asking if the watcher they captured was sent by Amelia, to which Ghislaine replies that it is almost certain. At that, she becomes concerned and explains to Ghislaine that the maskman was wearing is a symbol used by the Wildcat traffickers, who are a fairly powerful guild in Rayfold. Meanwhile, Ghislaine becomes surprised upon hearing the name of Wildcat traffickers. Belinda then continues to say that the Wildcat traffickers specialize in smuggling but also engage in assassination, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and other vile activities. They are filthy criminals who accept all kinds of vile work, and among them are many skilled former mercenaries, making them a shadowy guild armed with significant combat power. Ghislaine becomes curious upon hearing this, so he asks Belinda how she knows this when she spends most of her time in the castle, to which she replies that she heard these things before she started working there. Then, with a carefree expression, she warns him to be careful, emphasizing that the Wildcats are persistent. In response, Ghislaine flashes a smile and assures her that he will be fine, reminding her that they have Gillian with them. Just then, something suddenly emerges from the ground after their carriage passes and quickly chases after them. However, Gillian senses their presence before they even make their move, and as soon as the creatures catch up to the carriage, they leap out of the ground, revealing themselves as Wildcat assassins, and rush to attack Gillian. At that, Gillian notices the ambush from underground but reacts instantly, drawing both his axe and sword to block their attacks simultaneously. He then skillfully swings his axe and cuts off one of the Wildcat's hands before immediately stabbing another in the chest. Afterward, before the man who lost his hand can even react, Gillian ruthlessly tears his head apart. Their lifeless bodies collapse to the ground. However, the moment their comrades die, the remaining Wildcats quickly cut several ropes, triggering a deadly trap. At that, massive trees come crashing down toward the carriage, and witnessing that, Gillian's eyes widen in surprise as Belinda cries out that the trees will crush them. Gillian then handles the situation by grabbing the ropes and forcefully slowing the horses down, and because of that, they narrowly avoid the falling trees. Ghislaine, however, remains calm, stating that he already expected the ambush. As the dust settles, Wildcat traffickers emerge from the shadows, and among them, Viego steps forward and calls out to Gillian, addressing him by his old title, the former captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. Gillian becomes stunned hearing his title spoken after so long, whereas Viego calls him a coward, accusing him of disbanding an entire group of mercenaries just because of his daughter. Gillian then steps down from the carriage and coldly tells the man that he has no idea what he is talking about. Viego gets irritated at that, so he angrily states that because of his actions, he ended up living a life he never wanted and asks if he has grown so senile that he cannot even recognize an old comrade. Gillian remains silent upon hearing him, but Viego, on the contrary, believes he is simply playing dumb, and he promises to make him remember even if doesn't want to. As he finishes saying this, he orders his men to kill the group, so the wildcats immediately charge at them. Ghislaine watches them from the side and asks Gillian if he needs help, to which Gillian shakes his head and tells him that it is okay, as the captain seems to have business with him, so he asks Ghislaine to rest for now, reassuring him that he can handle this alone. Then, before the wildcat's swords can even touch him, Gillian channels his mana into his massive axe and swings it with immense force, tearing 4 enemies apart in a single motion. The remaining wildcats freeze in shock at the sheer power of the attack, but within moments, they snap out of it and rush toward him once more, ready to fight. Gillian then takes out his short sword and immediately swings his axe, tearing apart the first person who gets too close. Following that, he stabs the second attacker in the neck with his sword, and as the third opponent lunges at him, he swiftly blocks the attack and counters with his axe, slicing the man cleanly in half. Meanwhile, Viego watches him closely, thinking that he still possesses the same power from before. Afterward, he suddenly orders his unit to split into 2 groups, instructing them to flank him from both sides. So the wildcats quickly follow their captain's command. However, before they can close in, Gillian swiftly mounts the carriage horse and surprises his enemies. As they watch in shock, he grabs a much larger axe and spins it through the air before charging straight at them. Then, channeling his mana into the weapon, he swings it in a single devastating motion, tearing through several wildcats at once. Some of them are thrown backward by the sheer force of his attack. At that, one of the remaining wildcats panics, exclaiming that he cannot get near the man, while another quickly advises the group to target the horse instead. Yet, before any of them can reach it, Gillian grabs the attached rope on his axe handle and swings it in a wide arc around him, instantly slicing their bodies apart in a single, brutal rotation. Meanwhile, Belinda witnesses the carnage unfolding before her eyes and becomes utterly shocked. However, just as Gillian finishes dealing with Viego's subordinates, Viego himself rushes forward to attack. Gillian, on the contrary, senses his energy and quickly grabs a shield, using it to block the captain's strike. Viego then glares at him and growls that he should not interfere with his work, especially after ruining his life, and with a menacing expression, he swears that he will kill him. Just then, he pulls out 3 blades and hurls them directly at his horse. After the horse collapses, Gillian swiftly jumps off, landing solidly on the ground. The moment he lands, he sees a blade coming straight for him, but he reacts instantly by pulling out his smaller axe and using it to block the attack. He then firmly states that he is no longer the captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries group, and soon after he slams his shield into his ribs, forcing him to stumble backward. Viego quickly regains his footing and yells to stop spouting nonsense, and asks who he claims to be if he is not the former captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries group. In response, Gillian coats his axe in mana and declares that he has discarded his past and menacingly tells him that he is now Ghislaine's subordinate. Viego's expression darkens with anger upon hearing him, so he furiously charges at Gillian once more, vowing to kill him no matter what. As their battle continues, Viego launches consecutive attacks using his short sword, but Gillian blocks each of his attacks. Viego then performs a powerful strike and pierces the uppermost part of his shield, and mentions that after he left, the Ratatosk mercenary corps collapsed. Therefore, thanks to him, he lost his purpose and was forced to live a disgraceful life just to survive. Gillian remains silent for a bit, but the next moment, he forcefully pushes his sword away, and swings his axe at him, which Viego swiftly dodges by dropping low before countering with a kick infused with mana. Gillian, however, manages to block the attack with his wooden shield, but the force of the blow shatters it. Following that, Viego glares at Gillian and explains that he was prepared to dedicate his entire life to making the Ratatosk mercenaries the greatest in history. However, he couldn't believe that his former captain threw everything away, only to end up as nothing more than a mere pawn of a spoiled noble. Unable to contain his anger, he then pulls out several blades and yells that he cannot forgive him. Soon after saying this, he charges his weapons with mana and hurls the blades toward him. Gillian, on the contrary, spins his axe and blocks the incoming attack. However, at that very moment, Viego suddenly appears in front of him and thrusts his sword forward. Gillian barely manages to dodge the incoming attack, but as Viego remains airborne, he swings his axe upward in a counterattack, which Viego blocks with his sword before landing. He then menacingly smiles, and while the two begin exchanging blows with increasing intensity, Viego remains convinced that no matter how strong he might be, that was only when he was the captain a few years ago. Then, as he leaps over him to evade his strike, he thinks that while Gillian spent his time searching for a cure for his daughter, he had been fighting countless battles to grow stronger. Afterward, using his sword as leverage, he lands behind Gillian, continuing to think that he believes he is no longer a match for him. Just then, he kicks the 3 blades that had been deflected earlier, and the weapons fly toward Gillian at high speed. Gillian, however, uses his armor to block the incoming blades, but the moment he does, Viego rushes toward him, attempting to capitalize on the opening. Gillian then senses his presence and swings his axe once again, but Viego barely avoids the attack by jumping over it. Afterward, he charges forward with his sword, and with a triumphant grin, he declares that it is over. Unfortunately for him, Gillian suddenly covers his hand in mana and grabs Viego's blade mid-strike, asking if that is the reason for his vengeance. Meanwhile, Viego fails to comprehend how he could grasp the dagger by putting mana around his hand and realizes that he has not been fighting at full strength until now. Following that, before he can react, Gillian slams the head of his axe directly into his face, sending him flying backward. His body then crashes into a tree with a heavy thud, and he grabs his face in pain. Soon after, Gillian steps forward and coldly tells him that he does not understand his true intentions. But if he truly wants to take revenge, there were plenty of chances for him, so he can't get why he didn't kill him earlier. Hearing that, Viego suddenly bursts into laughter and tells him that he doesn't know anything. He reveals that he had already visited the place where he once lived. But what he found was not the captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries. Instead, all that was left was a feeble old man who wasn't even worth killing. His thin eyes burn with frustration as he demands to know where the Gillian he once admired has disappeared to. Gillian, unfazed by the question, tosses the dagger onto the ground and tells Viego to pick it up. He then takes out another sword and yells that he is now merely a body bound to another's will. But at least for this very moment, he will still grant his former comrade the highest level of respect, just as the captain of the Ratatosk mercenaries would do. Hearing this, Viego's soul dance in excitement as he picks up his weapon and charges at him. Their weapons clash once more, and Viego exclaims that this is exactly what he had wished for. He then intensifies his attacks, striking with greater speed and force, and despite the relentless assault, Gillian keeps up, expertly countering each strike. Suddenly, Gillian swings his axe in a massive arc, but Viego ducks low to evade it and immediately counters. Gillian, on the contrary, evades his first attack and then blocks the next one with his axe. Following that, he skillfully forces Viego's dagger downward before stabbing him in the rib with his sword. Upon impact, blood comes out of his mouth, but he grits his teeth and endures the pain. He then quickly attempts another strike, but Gillian dodges the attack effortlessly, and the next moment he raises his axe high for the finisher. Afterward, he solemnly declares that he will remember him not just as an enemy but as the 5th unit commander of the Ratatosk mercenaries and calls him by his full name, Viego Villanos. Hearing this, Viego's expression softens, and despite the pain, he smiles. The moment he smiles, Gillian stabs him, and after the man dies, he picks up his dagger. Then, while he is staring at his comrade's corpse, Ghislaine commends him on his work, and Belinda remarks that they will make some money from selling the Wildcat's loot. As they get closer, Gillian bows his head and apologizes for causing more delays than necessary, to which Ghislaine assures that it is fine. He then stares at Gillian, thinking about how he never expected him to be so extraordinary. When he first left home to start mercenary work, the stories he heard about Gillian from his seniors helped lay the foundation for him to become the Mercenary King, so he feels happy that he has gained a reliable comrade. He then asks Gillian if he remembers who he was, to which he tells him that he does. He then raises Viego's sword and states that he was his old comrade. These words resonate with Ghislaine as he wonders what his old comrades are doing right now. But he is certain that they are living a life of their own because this is before they met him, and he knows that he will have to scout these people at some point. Afterward, Ghislaine tells the group that they should follow Belinda's suggestion and gather anything valuable from the Wildcats. To that, Belinda orders Gillian to take the lead and start collecting for them. but the man reminds the maid that he is not her subordinate. Moving on, time passes quickly, and 2 days later, the group enters Perdium territory. Belinda becomes relieved to see that they have finally arrived, whereas Gillian looks at the city and asks his master if that is Perdium, and in response, Ghislaine confirms that it is. He then thinks about how he feels happy that he has a home to return to, as when he first ran away from home. He believed that he would be able to come back anytime. Afterward, as Gillian carefully observes the country, Ghislaine suddenly asks him if he likes their land, to which Gillian hesitantly replies that their country is great. However, Ghislaine startles him by immediately mentioning that their country is actually in bad condition. He then explains that all the houses are outdated, and renovations are out of the question, whereas the fields are uncultivated because all the farmers have been conscripted into the military, forcing them to leave the land fallow. Hearing this, Gillian acknowledges that he has heard of Perdium's ongoing wars with the northern barbarians, but admits that the situation is worse than he expected. However, to their surprise, Ghislaine declares that he will resolve all these problems, emphasizing that he needs his strength to do so. He knows that the battle ahead is going to be a very long one, as it is a battle to eliminate everything connected to Duke Delphine, and to protect what was once taken for granted. Yet, with determination, he promises to revive the land no matter what he has to do. Later, as they enter the country, Belinda suddenly sees something shocking and urgently informs Ghislaine to look ahead. At that, when Ghislaine raises his head, he is taken aback by the sight before him. He then quickly recognizes the silhouette of a man clad in armor, with a coat draped over his shoulder, and reveals that he is his father. After that, at Perdium Castle, a discussion arises where the Count suggests reducing their forces, but one man argues that maintaining the front lines properly will be difficult if they cut their forces down, while another advises the Count to request more support from the Rayfold family. The General Administrator, Homer, reveals that the Rayfolds are the ones who reduced the support fund, and are currently gathering soldiers and stockpiling food, surprising the knight in the room. Another man states that they need the funds to rebuild the Forest of Beasts garrison, which was partially destroyed during the last battle against the orcs, adding that reducing the Night Order's forces is barely enough to give them some breathing space, but poses a significant risk. As the men argue, Ghislaine watches, finding their behavior normal. The knight in front of him is the knight captain, Randolph, the bearded man is the treasurer, Albert, and the general administrator is Homer. Ghislaine then wonders how long it has been since he saw his father as the young lord of Perdium. It has only been a few months, but as the Mercenary King, it has been several decades. Afterward, he calls out to his father, who is known to be Count Cecil Perdium. As a child, he never liked his father for being so strict and serious, but now he sees the burdens of exhaustion and fatigue weighing on Zwalter's shoulders, and understands the responsibilities of a lord. Zwalter then takes a sip of his tea and mentions that he heard his son left the castle for a week, to which Ghislaine responds that he visited the Rayfolds. At that, Zwalter asks if he caused trouble there, but Ghislaine assures him he didn't. Albert then turns to Ghislaine, saying he heard he won a duel against Cain and won money, which he finds hard to believe, and with a serious look, he asks if he went to Rayfold to gamble. Annoyed that they think he went to gamble when he actually went to invest, Ghislaine clarifies that he had business with Amelia. Homer reminds him to think before he acts, since he will take over Perdium, but Ghislaine remains unbothered and assures him that he understands and asks him not to worry, further irritating Homer. Zwalter then places his tea down, asks his subordinates to stop, and tells Ghislaine that he heard he made some good trouble while he was away, which makes Ghislaine confused. Afterward, he flashes a serious expression and asks if it is true that he executed Jamal and Philip for trying to sell Alina. Surprised that his father is referring to those worthless knights, he listens as Randolph states that it is impossible for Ghislaine to have killed them alone, claiming that they must have fought each other and that the story got exaggerated, believing that Ghislaine only delivered the final blow. Understanding why Randolph is angry despite the knights being traitors, as their deaths at his hands do not sit well with the captain, Ghislaine avoids trouble by going along with Randolph's version. At that, with an arrogant smile, Randolph says he knew it, but to Ghislaine's shock, Zwalter tells him he did a great job, stating that it does not matter how he handled them. What matters is that Alina is alive. Hearing that, Ghislaine thinks about how this is the first compliment he has ever received from his father. Taking the opportunity, he asks his father for a request, surprising Zwalter. Before he can continue, Homer tells him to stop if he is going to ask for money, and Randolph agrees, angrily reminding him of the trouble he has caused so far, including selling military provisions for gambling money, lighting the front gate on fire to grill an army horse, and melting all the armor to forge a worthless legendary sword, which make Ghislaine unable to argue. He then clarifies that he simply seeks permission, prompting the Count to ask for what. At that, he confidently reveals that he wants to pioneer the Forest of Beasts and shocks everyone in the room. The scene then shifts to Ghislaine's bedroom, where with the same confident expression, he states that his father denied his request. According to him, Swalter freaked out and yelled at him, to which Belinda tells him that this was expected, since the place is filled with monsters, adding that there is nothing to gain from dealing with it. Ghislaine then asks Gillian if he has heard his plan from Belinda, so Gillian confirms, believing that he plans to pioneer the Forest of Beasts with the funds received from the Rayfold's daughter. However, he warns that the forest is known as a place of death from which no one returns alive, and since nothing is known about the place, everyone avoids it. Ghislaine, on the other hand, tells him that he is well informed and admits that there is actually nothing to gain from entering the forest. Following that, he stands up and walks to the door and says they need to get started, whereas Belinda reminds him that he has not received the Count's permission and asks if he will still proceed. In response, Ghislaine turns around and explains that he does not need his father's permission, as it was just out of courtesy, and insists that he must do this. Belinda then asks what is in the forest that makes him so obsessed with it, but Ghislaine tells her he will explain later. Afterward, he thinks knowing that revealing the truth now would cause trouble, and if he successfully pioneers the forest, he will gain massive funds, as a massive runestone vein is buried not far from the entrance. Runestones, created when ore is infused with mana, are an extremely rare mineral that mages highly value, used in barriers, magic circles, scrolls, alchemy, and research. In his previous life, Duke Delphine was the one who discovered it, but now only he has this knowledge. On the other hand, though Belinda does not understand his intentions, she gives up, trusting that he has a plan, while Gillian assures him that he will follow his orders. Ghislaine then instructs Belinda to head to the nearby guild and hire 200 mercenaries, so she can't believe he is spending the money he risked his life to get. Just then, Gillian warns that mercenaries are rough and unruly, and if too many are gathered, they may become difficult to control, possibly turning on their employer. Acknowledging the risk, Ghislaine reveals that they will personally select the useful ones. Gillian asks what he means, so Ghislaine states that they will recruit the most skilled small-scale mercenary group in the north. Gillian becomes nervous hearing that, so he asks if he is referring to the Crazy Dogs, also known as the Cerberus mercenaries, notorious for turning on their employer if things go south. Ghislaine confirms that he correct, and then he commences their mission saying they need to put a leash on the Crazy Dogs. Moving forward, the Cerberus mercenaries are seen camping on the outskirts of Zimbar territory. Just then, one of the mercenaries spots them approaching and tells his colleague that they have arrived, but the other man refers to Ghislaine as a poor soul, believing they do not know what they are walking into. Observing through a spyglass, he notices that Ghislaine is a noble and assumes they will make a lot of money off him. Suddenly, he screams in pain as Gillian grabs his head through the spyglass and lifts him with one hand. Calling Gillian a bastard, the man demands to know what he is doing, but without hesitation, Gillian throws him with such force that the upper half of his body gets buried in the sand. The rest of the mercenaries become furious at the display and yell at him, asking if he has lost his mind. Just then, a mercenary steps out, holding a chain and a hook, warning Gillian that just because he is from a noble family, he should not expect to return home alive. To his surprise, Ghislaine calmly approaches him on his horse and tells him to shut up and bring his captain. The man laughs upon hearing this and spins his chain as he mocks the noble brat for losing his mind. He then tells Ghislaine it is time to learn what it means to take responsibility, and as he says this, he hurls his chain at him, but before the spiked ball can reach Ghislaine, something strikes it, stopping it in midair. The one who intervenes is Gillian, who wedges his dagger into a part of the chain, shocking all the mercenaries. As the spiked ball falls to the ground, Ghislaine smiles, already aware that words won't reach them. He then menacingly orders Gillian to fight just enough to ensure the men survive, so Gillian, grabbing the chain, assures his master that he understands. At that moment, he entangles the man's arm with his own chain and pulls toward him effortlessly. As the man stays in the air, Gillian swings the spiked ball using his neck as a support and destroys his stomach, making him scream in pain. Witnessing that, the mercenaries call Gillian a bastard, vowing not to go easy on him just because he serves a noble. However, as soon as they charge, Gillian twists his blade around the chain and uses it to lift the injured man, hurling him at the incoming mercenaries and knocking them aside. The others become shocked to see this, and when Gillian turns to glare at them, they get terrified by the look in his eyes. Meanwhile, Ghislaine dismounts and demands to know how long they plan to make them wait, and calling them small fry, he orders them to fetch their captain. At that moment, a voice responds, saying he was sleeping, and asks what caused the commotion. The mercenaries immediately clear a path and stand at attention as a red-haired man approaches. Introducing himself as Kaor, the captain of the Cerberus mercenaries, he asks why they are looking for him. In response, Ghislaine says that the question is foolish, as there is only one reason to seek out a mercenary group, which is to entrust a request to them. But Kaor asks why a client would beat up his men and reminds him that nobles should have better manners. However, Ghislaine smilingly claims this is his way of greeting him, and he thought this would be the best way to properly tame him. Amused by it, Kaor smirks, wondering what would happen if he were to greet them twice. Moving on, inside Kaor's tent, several mercenaries are present, as Kaor asks Ghislaine to state his request. In response, he reveals that he wants to hire them to pioneer the forest of beasts. At that, the mercenaries become shocked since they cannot believe he intends to send them into such a monster-infested place. Kaor then smilingly asks what kind of person he must be to even think of disturbing such a dangerous forest. So in response, Ghislaine calmly declares himself as the young Lord of Perdium. After a short pause, Kaor and his men burst into laughter and realizes they are speaking to the infamous insane young lord from the rumors, and concludes that he must have lost his mind. Kaor then tells Ghislaine he has no idea what the Forest of Beasts is like, having been raised in a greenhouse, and it is not a place for rookies. He then loses interest in the conversation, signals his men, declaring the negotiation over as the mercenaries raise their weapons, prompting Gillian to lift his axe in response. However, when Ghislaine taunts Kaor, asking if he is scared, Kaor becomes shocked. He then expresses disappointment, stating that he had heard the Cerberus mercenaries were highly skilled, but their reputation must be a hoax. Kaor, on the contrary, places his foot on the table and warns Ghislaine not to provoke him, reminding him that mercenaries do not take jobs that don't pay off, to which Ghislaine retorts that weaklings often make excuses. At that, Kaor says the mood is ruined and dismisses his words as pathetic provocations, calling him a clueless brat not even worth killing, though he assures him that he will let him go if he hands over some money for the trouble and get lost. However, with a serious expression, Ghislaine refuses and makes a bold declaration by formally requesting Amoriana's recognition with the captain of the Cerberus mercenaries. Gillian and the other mercenaries become shocked by it, whereas Kaor asks if he even knows what that means, to which Ghislaine smiles confidently and assures him that he does. Moriana's recognition is a brutal mercenary betting tradition where two opponents fight with a single dagger, one arm tied to the other's, without relying on mana, and stepping outside the small circle counts as a loss. The confined space forces them into a life or death struggle where even the victor often dies. Ghislaine then explains that the loser must absolutely obey the winner, essentially becomes the winner's dog. As he asks Kaor how he feels about the bet, Gillian wonders why his noble master would even know about such a filthy tradition, as rejecting this challenge in the mercenary world is equivalent to admitting weakness, making refusal impossible. Kaor then bursts into mad laughter, but after a while, he flashes a creepy smile and tells his men that they have a bold little noble who wants recognition in a mercenary's way, so they should help him out. Afterward, as they go outside, Ghislaine and Kaor stand with their arms tied together, each holding a dagger, while the mercenaries cheer for their captain, urging him to kill the insolent noble. Assuming Ghislaine must have only heard about this tradition and decided to challenge him without experience, Kaor warns that he cannot back out now and then pulls Ghislaine toward him with a confident smile, revealing that he has done this 5 times. However, Ghislaine calmly returns to his original spot before pulling Kaor close and meeting his gaze with a condescending smirk, saying that he has done this over 100 times. Moving on, as soon as Ghislaine and Kaor are asked to start, the two of them charge at each other with their daggers, both managing to dodge the attacks. Then, they swing their daggers again and barely miss each other. Later, Ghislaine attacks Kaor with more strength, but he blocks his strikes, pulling him in front of himself and trying to stab him from behind. However, Ghislaine manages to block each of his strikes even though he can't see the dagger well. He then bends his head, making Kaor miss an attack, and quickly takes the opportunity to counter, but Kaor manages to dodge it. Afterward, Kaor pulls Ghislaine close and delivers a heavy kick to his leg, making him feel the power of the strike. Then, flashing a cheeky smile, the mercenary tells Ghislaine that he is doing better than expected, and admits he cannot believe that he has supposedly done a Moriana's recognition 100 times, which is something that most people don't get to do once in their life. The next moment, Kaor charges at Ghislaine, advising him to make his bluffs sound more realistic, and doesn't give him a chance to attack. Meanwhile, the members of the Cerberus mercenaries become thrilled by this and urge their boss to kill Ghislaine for messing with them. But then they immediately fall silent when Gillian glares at them. He then thinks about how this is a losing battle as the area of the circle is barely large enough for one person to lie down, and the rules forbid mana and force, forcing both fighters to rely purely on physical strength. Not to mention the size difference, the limited movements due to their hands being tied, and the accumulating damage make it difficult for Ghislaine to dodge or block Kaor's attacks, while his opponent has every opportunity to take control and dominate the fight. He then gently places his hand on his axe, ready to interfere if the situation becomes dire. On the other side, Kaor grabs Ghislaine's hand and holds him down, swinging his dagger at him, but Ghislaine jumps to dodge the attack and lands on the other side. However, the moment he lands, he feels pain surging from the leg he used to block Kaor's earlier attack, and the damage is stacking up due to the lack of mana protection. Kaor smiles when he sees the look on his face and tells him he is looking pale, asking if he has already reached his limit. He then doesn't give him a chance to recover and begins attacking more fiercely, believing Ghislaine looks pathetic as he tries to resist his strength. But he acknowledges that he has more guts than the other nobles he has met. Still, he believes Ghislaine lacks skill and assumes his strategy is to deflect and dodge blade strikes with his weapon, while absorbing less damaging blows with his body. However, Moriana's recognition prohibits the use of mana, meaning all attacks inevitably accumulates, even if he block it. What's more, he can tell that he is already aware of the strain building in his legs as it's written all over his face. Kaor then smiles, wanting to see him struggle for his life because, to him, that is what makes this fun. Following that, he spins his dagger and charges at Ghislaine, who manages to block his attack. Kaor then moves in closer and swings at his head, but Ghislaine bends down to dodge it. The next moment, he tries to attack from below, but Kaor blocks it, then drags his hand to the side and holds him down, following up with a kick. As Ghislaine blocks it with his already wounded leg, he feels intense pain, and because of the look on his face, Kaor believes he has already won. He then raises his dagger and demands Ghislaine to die, exciting his subordinates, whereas Gillian takes out his axe, ready to rescue his master. However, Ghislaine suddenly flashes a smile and skillfully dodges Kaor's dagger by going low, shocking the mercenary, who cannot believe he avoided the attack from that position. Ghislaine then swiftly pushes himself to the other side and delivers a cut near his ribs. Witnessing that, Kaor becomes stunned as well as the Cerberus mercenaries and Gillian. Kaor then angrily charges at Ghislaine, but he skillfully goes low, and the moment after, he lands another cut on his chest. Meanwhile, the mercenaries are in disbelief as it was their captain who was the one overpowering Ghislaine just moments ago, and urge him to show what a mercenary is made of. Later, Kaor swings his dagger at Ghislaine's head, but he dodges by going low again. Then he pushes himself back up while ramming his shoulder into the captain's face. Following that, he clenches his fist around his dagger and lands multiple blows. Before Kaor regains his footing, Ghislaine twists his dagger and stabs him in the hand, making him grunt in pain. After that, Kaor yells loudly and charges at him even more fiercely, but Ghislaine easily dodges his attacks, leaving him confused. Then as Kaor desperately swings his sword, he thinks that just moments ago, he had been struggling to withstand his strength. Gillian, on the other hand, finally understands that swinging with power stiffens the muscles and burdens the body with rigidity, so by trying to dominate the fight through sheer force, Kaor has lost his flexibility. But the Grand Duke isn't fighting against his opponent's momentum. He's relaxing and redirecting it to create his own flow. He never expected his master to overcome the disadvantage of size in this manner, so he put his axe away. On the contrary, breathing heavily, Kaor hears his men taunting him, telling him to stop playing around and reminding him that no one is laughing. Ghislaine then commends Kaor's resolve, saying many opponents would break the rules and use mana when cornered. Kaor smiles upon hearing this, as he tells Ghislaine that he is talking like someone who has actually done this 100 times, adding that he won the position of captain with this very method, and that mercenaries who break the rules don't last in this line of work. Ghislaine, however, smiles when he hears this and says that he likes his spirit. Kaor admits he is at a disadvantage in a head-to-head match, but with a smirk, he reminds Ghislaine that the conditions for victory aren't limited to just one. Then, as Kaor suddenly grabs Ghislaine's hand and lifts him, aiming to throw him outside the circle, it is revealed in Moriana's recognition. Stepping outside the circle even once results in an automatic loss. With that, he becomes certain that if he can send his entire body past the boundary, he will win. However, just before his leg can touch the ground, he tightens his grip on Kaor's hand and pushes his legs to his knees, stopping his momentum at the last second. Following that, he pulls Kaor's hand and skillfully exchanges location with him all, while not leaving a single step on the ground. Afterward, keeping Kaor's other hand locked, he bashes his head on the ground. Then, as the fight comes to an end, the Cerberus mercenary members stay in shock as they witness that their captain is out of the circle. At that, Ghislaine declares to Kaor that he wins, whereas Kaor asks who he is to have this caliber of skill. In response, Ghislaine gives him a cold gaze and tells him that he doesn't like his attitude, as he is talking to his master right now. Just then, to Kaor's surprise, Ghislaine pulls his hand to get him inside the ring once more. At that, Kaor asks what he wants, informing that the fight is over. In response, Ghislaine tells him that he hasn't gone out of the circle just yet, and while confidently clenching his fist, he adds that he will be disciplining his subordinate now. Ghislaine then gives the captain a punch in his face, knocking him down, but the man quickly asks him to wait, reminding him that the fight is over once a combatant steps out of the circle. However, Ghislaine gives him another punch and asks if he is going to fight according to the rules on the battlefield, to which Kaor calls him a bastard, saying that a noble is not supposed to behave this way. However, with a serious look, Ghislaine lifts up his fist and warns him not to talk back to his master. To that, Kaor calls him a lunatic, and in response, Ghislaine gives him another punch and does not stop, continuing to hit the captain's face until his hand is covered in blood. Meanwhile, the mercenaries wonder if it's okay to let Ghislaine do that, since the bet is already over. On the other hand, as Kaor begs him to stop, Ghislaine pulls him up, and with a cold gaze, he reminds him that he is not yet out of the circle, horrifying Kaor, whose already swollen face twists in fear. He then quickly turns to his men, asking if they will allow this to happen and ordering them to kill Ghislaine, prompting the mercenaries to immediately grab their swords. However, before they can move, Gillian takes out his axe, making them quickly stop in their tracks. Then, in a scary tone, Gillian warns that anyone who hinders his master's disciplinary measure will be killed, and knowing that he is not bluffing, everyone freezes. Meanwhile, Kaor trembles like a scared dog and turns to his new master as Ghislaine asks if he is done. But the next thing he sees is his fist, realizing that he messed up. As he gets beaten to a pulp, he thinks that throughout his life, all the nobles Kaor has met were simply overconfident pigs, traitors, and narcissists who folded under a little scare tactic, making it entertaining for him to take money from their pockets. Thanks to how he treated them, he earned the title of Mad Dog. But now, the so-called Mad Dog is taking a beating from a noble brat he underestimated. Afterward, the mercenaries group worried about their captain's state, but they are powerless to act. Meanwhile, Ghislaine, taking a look at Kaor's body, wonders if he has done enough, and then orders the men to stop standing around and bring him some water, a bandage, and a towel. The men, shocked by his unexpected command, hesitate, but Ghislaine warns them that their captain will die soon if they don't act quickly, prompting them to accept his order in surprise. Gillian, on the other hand, carefully observes his master and notices that the unruly mercenaries are now listening to his commands. In the world of mercenaries, where fists speak louder than the law, he believes that the Grand Duke engraved his authority into their minds using the most direct and straightforward method, showing them who the boss is. Later, Kaor, now sitting in a chair with his body wrapped in bandages, watches as Ghislaine places a paper on the table and asks him to sign it. Knowing he has no choice, Kaor stares at Ghislaine, takes out his pen, and signs, telling him to take it. However, Ghislaine, with a scary look, orders him to repeat what he just said. Kaor becomes nervous by it, so he shakily corrects himself, saying that he looks forward to working with him. At that, Ghislaine grabs his hand, making him even more fearful, before telling him that they are now family, and he too looks forward to working together. A few days later, at the outskirts of Perdium territory, some mercenaries gather, with one yawning and asking if anyone knows why they were called so early in the morning. To that, a bald man with a shield tells them that he heard a rumor that their employer is the young lord of Perdium, at which one of them scoffs, calling Ghislaine just a brat and doubting his ability to handle the mercenaries properly. Believing that this job might turn out to be easy, Just then a shirtless man claps his hands, gathering the group's attention, as a huge man steps forward and suggests that they need a representative. The others become surprised upon seeing him and recognize him as Gordon the Muscle. At that, with a smile, Gordon acknowledges their admiration, saying he thoroughly observed their admirable posture, as they discussed ways to reap rewards without working hard. However, he points out that they won't get the results they want unless they unite their voices, making the mercenaries realize he is right, as one recalls a time when an idiot's unreasonable demand ruined everything. The bald man then asks Gordon what he plans to do, to which he replies that in matters like this, it is important to know one's boundaries. Then, opening a bag full of coins, he explains that he will pressure their employer as their representative, and asks them to contribute to his hard work. The mercenaries become impressed by this and believe Gordon is perfect for the job, knowing that his large build will be effective for intimidation, and they commend him for being so skilled at making money despite spending all day working out. But just as they pour their coins into the bag, one of them notifies that someone is approaching. Raising their heads, they see Ghislaine riding toward them alone, and it surprises them. Then, one of the mercenaries judges him to be their employer, while the other mocks that him might run away after seeing Gordon's muscles. Following that, Gordon confidently orders them to move closer with him to create a scary atmosphere, grinning as he declares it is time to teach a brat how scary the real world is. However, before he can step forward, he notices that a large group of people are moving alongside him. One mercenary quickly recognizes the dog snout-shaped helmets, identifying them as the Cerberus mercenaries. Gordon becomes shocked hearing this, so he wonders how Ghislaine managed to make those crazy dogs follow him. Later, as Ghislaine approaches them, the mercenaries instinctively step back. He then turns to Gordon and asks if he is the representative, to which Gordon confirms that he is. Following that, when Ghislaine asks for his name, he introduces himself as Gordon the Muscle, prompting Ghislaine to comment that it's a unique name before tapping Gordon's chest and calling it pretty cool. Then, introducing himself as the young Lord of Perdium, Ghislaine orders Gordon to gather the mercenaries, and with a serious expression, he announces that from now on, they will conquer the Forest of Beasts. Moving forward, as Belinda helps Ghislaine wear his armor, he narrates that all preparations for pioneering the forest are complete. Construction of the expedition's temporary base and resource procurement are done, and he has acquired the most important asset, the troops. He then asks Belinda to do a final head count, and she confirms there are 148 contracted mercenaries, and 41 Cerberus mercenaries, making a total of 192. To that, he praises her work and asks if Skaven has been properly informed, to which she replies that he has, and surprisingly, even ensured they wouldn't be detected while entering the forest. Ghislaine feels assured hearing it, so he calls the mercenaries to line up and tells them about the unknown dangers of the forest ahead, from various monsters to unseen threats beyond imagination. But despite that, he is determined to conquer that place. Hearing that, the mercenaries become shocked and discuss that they could die inside the forest, whereas Belinda angrily comments that they are daring to interrupt while their young master is still speaking. However, to their surprise, Ghislaine offers triple their current wage if the mission succeeds, which tempts them greatly. Belinda becomes concerned about their funds already being depleted, so she whispers to him about the problem, but Ghislaine assures her that boosting morale is necessary. He then thinks about how he will be able to pay them and still have more left over if the mission succeeds anyway, so he assures Belinda that he will make good on his promise. On the other hand, Kaor finds it crazy yet bold, but Gillian believes their master always has a plan. Afterward, declaring the mercenaries as the Forest of Beasts expedition team, Ghislaine orders them to move out. As soon as they reach the forest, they begin cutting trees, and even Ghislaine joins in to help them. After cutting down some trees, sunlight breaks through the dense forest, which Ghislaine finds reassuring. He then directs the men to clear a path, chop logs, and uproot stumps, knowing from Delphine's developmental journal that he obtained in his past life that the forest is vast and rich with resources, and that someday they will drive out all the monsters and make full use of the forest's resources. However, for now, his priority is reaching the runestone vein to earn money, and the wealth he will gain from this will greatly help Perdium's defense against a looming conspiracy. At that, Kaor looks at Ghislaine, wondering why even the contractor is stepping up to do something. On the other hand, some mercenaries speculate that Ghislaine is only working to maintain noble dignity, while others think he will give up soon. Belinda becomes annoyed hearing this, so she orders them to work instead of yapping. She then asks Ghislaine why he is working personally, adding that they are taking him lightly because he is doing the same work as them. In response, he mentions that it's fine, as the more hands mean faster progress, and staying in one place too long is dangerous. Belinda accepts his reasoning and remarks that he talks as if he already knows everything. Kaor, meanwhile, finds it ironic that while Ghislaine has a woman worrying about him, he himself has become his employer's dog, walking toward hell willingly. At that, Gillian smacks him with a log, so Kaor angrily asks if he is picking a fight. Meanwhile, Ghislaine thinks that everything seems to be going smoothly, and the Duchy of Delphine, after conquering the kingdom and forming a new dynasty, had begun large-scale development in the forest, though he couldn't find out why. However, he managed to obtain a developmental journal detailing major resource locations and the monster ecosystem, allowing him to come somewhat prepared, whereas the mercenary wonders why Ghislaine brought so many oil lamps instead of cheaper torches. Ghislaine feels uneasy from the lack of incidents, and since he only read them in the journal and never saw what has actually happened, he warns them not to let their guard down as they venture deeper into the forest. Afterward, while cutting trees, a mercenary notices how dark it has become, and another comments that they haven't encountered a single monster. Then they question the rumors about the forest's dangers and joke that the tripled pay was too generous for such an easy job. Afterward, as Gordon carries a log on his shoulder, he notices something and informs his colleagues that their surroundings seem strange, as despite cutting down many trees, their path ahead is mysteriously blocked. As the mercenaries start panicking, Ghislaine orders them to be alert, so they halt their work and unsheathe their weapons. Meanwhile, those who had dismissed the forest's dangers now feel the shift in atmosphere. Just then, Ghislaine calls out to Gordon, saying that he will die if he stays there. Following that, he warns Gordon to move toward them slowly, and as the man turns, he trips over a tree because of his log hitting a tree and falls on the ground. The mercenaries then call him an idiot, whereas Gordon fearfully looks back to see an odd-shaped tree. Expecting an attack, the group braces themselves, but nothing happens, leading the bald mercenary to mock Ghislaine's paranoia. The bald man then tells everyone that it only seems like there is no path because the scenery is similar, and the idiot is just mistaken. At that, Ghislaine warns the man, saying he will die if he stays there too, and the moment he dismisses the fear, vines suddenly wrap around his waist and pull him high into the trees, where a massive mouth filled with sharp teeth awaits to chomp him down. Before he can react, the monster swallows him whole, and it is mentioned that this creature has no detectable presence, no way to predict its movements, and can only be avoided with awareness. As the mercenaries stare in horror, the monstrous tree opens its eye, and Ghislaine realizes he is facing a Durusant. A large number of Durusants surround the group, causing Gordon and the rest of the mercenaries to panic and attempt to flee, believing they will be eaten. However, before they can escape, the monsters extend their vines, grabbing and throwing several mercenaries into their mouths. Fortunately for Gordon, he manages to cling to a tree and screams for help. One of his comrades then rushes to him with an axe, instructing him to hold on tight before attempting to cut the vine. But to his shock, the vine remains unaffected while his axe slowly begins to break. As he wonders why the vine is so sturdy, the monster pulls Gordon, making the large man scream like a baby. However, just before it can lift him completely, Ghislaine appears midair, coating his sword in mana and slicing through the vine before landing a strike on the monster's eye, causing blood to burst out. After Gordon falls on the ground due to being freed, the mercenaries become astonished that their employer managed to wound it, and assume that the Durusant's eyes must be their weakness. However, taking a deep breath, Ghislaine screams at the top of his voice, commanding the mercenaries to pull themselves together. Shocked by his authority, they listen as he warns them that spreading out will make them easier targets, so they are to raise their shields, form a tight formation, and focus on defense until the next command, which they obey without hesitation. And one of them states that they refuse to die in a place like this. Ghislaine then rushes to the carriage and asks Kaor about the oil lamps, to which Kaor confirms they are all there. At that, Ghislaine instructs him to light them and throw them at the monsters to burn them down, revealing the true reason for bringing so many lamps. On the other side, one of Kaor's teammates alerts him that the monsters are watching them, and the moment he says this, Ghislaine orders Kaor to throw the lamps immediately. To that, Kaor and his men begin hurling the lamps, telling them to get a taste of fire. But as the lamps float midair, the monsters use their vines to swat them away before they can reach, rendering the plan ineffective. Shocked by their quick response, Kaor's subordinate laments that they cannot burn the monsters down like this. Afterward, as a Durusant fires its vines at them, Gillian suddenly appears, blocking the attack with his axe. Meanwhile, Belinda infuses some throwing knives with mana and swiftly throws knives at the monster's eye, whereas Ghislaine orders both Gillian and Belinda to prepare the lamps again while guarding the Cerberus mercenaries. Then, declaring that he will draw the monster's attention, he raises his sword, and at that moment, a Durusant launches its vines at him. Witnessing that, Belinda cries out for him to watch out, but Ghislaine skillfully slices through the vines before the other Durusants join the attack. At that, he agilely dodges their strikes, but suddenly one of the monsters lifts its leg to crush him. The mercenaries, on the contrary, become shocked that these tree-like creatures have legs and assume their employer is about to be stomped. However, Ghislaine coats his sword in mana once more, slashes the monster's leg, then leaps up and drives his blade into its eye. The remaining Durusants shift their focus onto him, much to the mercenaries' amazement. Taking advantage of the distraction, Belinda commands the Cerberus mercenaries to throw the lamps now, and convinced this will work, they immediately act. The monsters then scream in pain as the flames spread across their bodies, making the Cerberus mercenaries cheer. But Ghislaine urges them not to stop, instructing them to continue throwing lamps until every Durusant is burned down. Watching the monsters burn, the mercenaries are in disbelief, realizing they might actually have a chance, though one expresses concern that the entire forest could catch fire at this rate. On the other hand, Gordon belittles the Durusants, saying they are nothing special and that, as trees, their weakness to fire is only natural. However, Ghislaine sternly warns the men not to lower their guard, shocking them as he informs them that the Durusants are about to reveal their true form. Suddenly, the monsters begin releasing steam, confusing the mercenaries, who wonder if the fire has already been extinguished. Just then, Belinda and Gillian rush to Ghislaine, with Belinda urgently asking what is happening, to which he explains that while the monsters' outer shells are weak to fire, their insides are different. He reveals that as the flames burn through the shell, they encounter the creature's moist inner flesh, causing steam to be released. Soon after, as the steam clears, the true form of the Durusants is unveiled, and they let out terrifying screams. The mercenaries, on the contrary, become utterly shocked as they cannot believe the monsters are still alive. At that moment, Ghislaine swiftly raises his sword, calling for everyone's attention. Then, with a commanding voice, he orders them to raise their weapons, warning that the battle will now be fought in close quarters. The moment he says this, he charges forward, leading the attack against the monstrous Durusants. He then bravely charges at the pack of monsters alone, while the mercenaries complain that they can't engage in battle against massive monsters as they can just stomp them to death. However, the next moment, Kaor and the Cerberus mercenary units follow him to fight the monsters, saying that they were waiting so long for this. Meanwhile, Belinda tells her master to be careful, whereas Gillian grabs the concerned mercenaries' attention, asking what they are all hesitating for. He adds that this is an order from young Lord Ghislaine and requests that they trust him. With no other way out, the frightened mercenaries regain courage and state that they believe the employer is going to do something about it, so they decide to trust him. Then, as Kaor and his men run amok, Ghislaine raises his sword, saying that they will be able to cut it without mana, since all of its bark has been burnt away and now they are nothing but huge target dummies, so he orders all of them to annihilate the monsters. Upon declaring his order, all of the expedition team members, including Belina, tear apart the monsters using their sheer numbers. Afterward, Ghislaine charges at one of the monsters, thinking hesitation means death, and that's why his role is to eradicate all hesitation from his followers. The moment after, he sticks his sword between the monster's grotesque teeth and defeats it by skillfully splitting it in half. Then, as the defeated monster falls on the ground, Ghislaine raises his sword, thinking that it is to instill the will for making the impossible possible. After all the Durusants fall, the mercenaries rejoice as they say that they killed all the monsters. Just then, Ghislaine orders everyone to line up, so wasting no time, they heed his command. After they all gather, Ghislaine reminds them that this is the Forest of Beasts, and though they are only at the entrance, it's already swarming with monsters like Durusants. The mercenaries shake up upon hearing his words, but Ghislaine promises them to fret not, as he will always be standing at the forefront. Then, flashing a serious expression, he assures them to trust him and follow after him. Hearing that, all the mercenaries become fired up, and they collectively respond to Ghislaine, saying, "Yes, sir." Moving forward, as the expedition continues, they encounter different beasts and barbarians and cut their way deeper into the forest. Then, as a bull-shaped monster charges at the expedition team, the mercenaries demand to know what they are facing now and complain that the monsters are endless. At that very moment, Gillian and Kaor blitz their way forward, and Kaor manages to cut off one of the monster's legs. To the mercenaries' surprise, the monster begins to fall their way, but before the monster can contact them, Gillian blocks the monster using his massive shield. As the monster becomes momentarily stunned, Ghislaine approaches the monster from the air and stabs its face while landing. After taking down the monster, he asks if anyone is injured, to which the mercenaries reply with a no and add that they are alive. Then, alleviating their focus on other monsters, they decide to stay by Ghislaine's side to stay alive while taunting the monsters to come at them. Witnessing the mercenaries, Gillian states that their formation is looking decent now, whereas Kaor adds that training through real combat always yields the best outcome. After all the current monsters are dealt with, Ghislaine orders the mercenaries to continue clearing the path, at which they begin chopping down trees, saying, "Yes, sir." Meanwhile, one of the frightened troops speechlessly stares at Ghislaine, thinking that everyone has gone insane and that crazy bastards are stuck in this crazy forest. As they continue their expedition, eventually night falls, and they arrive at a location near a pond. The soldiers dash to drink the water upon laying their eyes on it and become surprised by how clean the water is. Meanwhile, Belinda comments that it's dangerous as they don't know what might come out from there. Ghislaine, on the contrary, thinks that they have taken the right path so far, knowing that this lake is the most important milestone in reaching the runestone mine. Afterward, he orders all the troops to set up the camp by the lake, announcing that they will be taking a break here. Then, as some mercenaries take rest, some regret their choice of coming here, while the others feel thankful that nothing happened these last 2 nights. Later, one of the concerned mercenaries named Manus approaches Gordon's group, proposing that they sneak out of the forest with him. He adds that they don't have to risk their lives anymore and asks if their lives matter more than money. In reply, Gordon tells him that their employer said their destination isn't too far from the entrance, but Manus asks with a surprised expression if he believes his words as is. He then reveals that their employer is well known to be the scoundrel of Perdium, so he believes the expedition is a disguise in order for him to achieve something. However, Gordon and his companions say they have already been paid, and not only that, but he has also saved their lives multiple times. At that, Manus tries to convince them, saying he admits Ghislaine is a good fighter, but in the end he is still a human, so only one mistake could spell trouble for all of them. He further tarnishes Ghislaine's reputation, saying he will use them as meat shields once the situation gets dire, just like all nobles do. Gordon and the team become speechless hearing it, as they acknowledge that he has a point. Manus, on the contrary, thinks that going back there alone with monsters waiting would be suicidal, and he will use them as baits if he needs to. At that moment, one of the mercenaries speaks up, asking if he is trying to say that they all would have died already if it weren't for the employer. Also, he points him toward Ghislaine treating the injured mercenaries and tells him to look over there. Meanwhile, as Ghislaine finishes treating one of the injured mercenaries, he instructs him to make sure water doesn't seep into his wound. At that, Belina asks why he is not using the expensive medicines for himself, to which Ghislaine responds that he believes this is what they are meant to be used for. Then, as he calls for the next patient, Manus watches in shock, whereas Gordon's colleague mentions that the medicines and potions he is using are more expensive than them, so he doesn't believe he would do that if he was going to use them as meat shields. The mood of the group completely shifts as they hear him and say that Ghislaine won't abandon them like that. Admitting defeat, Manus walks away, cursing the old man and devising a plan to persuade at least a few of them to get out, which is difficult right now. Soon after, Ghislaine walks up to the group and advises them to rest without chit-chatting, to which they respond with yes. Following that, he calls out Gillian and Kaor and informs them that there is something they need to talk about for a moment. As they are on their way, Kaor asks Ghislaine if he wants to leave Manus free, to which he assures that he can't do anything due to the monsters for a while anyway. But more importantly, he wants to confirm something right now. Later, as all the important people gather in a secluded area, Belinda asks why he wants them to count the number of lamps right now, while Kaor announces that there are currently about 24, so hearing that, Ghislaine thinks that there are some missing as he expected. Then, he reminds them that monsters have rushed at them day and night, but they haven't seen any of them for the past 2 nights. Kaor and Belinda wonder in confusion upon hearing him, but Gillian explains they have entered the territory of a nocturnal monster, and one with a huge influence at that. In response, Ghislaine tells Gillian that he is correct, and looking back at the dense forest, he states that the real danger begins now. Moving on, as time passes on the camp, all the mercenaries soundly sleep wherever they want. On the other hand, as Gordon is sleeping, he gets interrupted by a flash of light, and he slowly opens his eyes. The moment he wakes up, he gets astounded as he sees a lantern floating in midair. At that, he stumbles backward, wondering why the lanterns suddenly start flying, and following that, he feels the presence of a monster licking his face. Startled by it, he screams in fear, waking up the other soldiers, and then he swings his mace in fear, attempting to get rid of the monsters. However, all his attack stays ineffective as the blows pass through the seemingly invisible monsters. Just then, Gordon's comrades asks what he is doing, to which he hesitantly answers that there was a monster beside him just now. However, his comrades become speechless hearing it and asks what he is saying since there is nothing around him. At that, he looks behind to confirm if what they are saying is true and finds that there really is nothing there. The mercenaries then begin to return to their bed asking Gordon if he had a nightmare, and sympathizes with him since they had to deal with many monsters. However, as they are about to return, some Cerberus mercenary members approach them saying it's not just sleep talking, but they woke up because they felt a strange presence, and then they saw a lantern disappear right before their eyes. Following that, everyone in the camp wakes up one by one due to the strange occurrences and wonder what is happening. To that, the Cerberus mercenary guy says one thing is for sure, that there certainly is something around here. Soon after, Ghislaine and his team arrive and grab their attention saying they saw right through it. Then, with a serious expression, he orders everyone to gather up. After that, as all the mercenaries gather together, Ghislaine and some core members start a discussion inside their tent. From there, Gordon learned from him that the monsters have surrounded them, whereas the Cerberus member finds out that they can't see them with their bare eyes. Meanwhile, Ghislaine also mentions to them that it's their characteristic and speculates that they must have started following them when they reach the lake. Then, he reveals that they are one of the monsters that dominate the night of this forest, and they are known as Hunters of Darkness, Falors. Additionally, they can melt into the darkness, which makes them invisible and impervious to physical attacks, and they hunt in groups of a few hundred by following their prey and taking away their light. Hearing that the monsters hunt in a group of few hundred, Gordon and the mercenary exclaim in shock. Afterward, Belinda asks if that's why they have been losing their lanterns, whereas Kaor questions if the monsters want to play with them before they kill them. Then, he eagerly suggests they attack the monsters first before they toy with them, but Ghislaine tells him they will wait before start attacking them, as that's the best timing for a counterattack. To that, Belinda mentions they have already lost more than half of their lanterns, so she believes they can't just wait for them. In response, Ghislaine says that attacking them recklessly will only stimulate their sadistic tendencies, and they will be losing their chance to wipe them all out at once. Hearing that, Gillian asks if there is a way to achieve that against hundreds of invisible monsters, to which Ghislaine responds that there is. He then asks Belinda if she prepared the magic scroll as he told her to, so she replies that she has given out one to each of the mercenaries. After confirming that, he mentions to everyone inside the tent that he will now explain how to fight them. Then, he starts drawing on the ground with the tip of his sword and explains that the herd of Falors has surrounded their camp from 3 different directions, and they are stealing their lamps to slowly tighten their position. Since they are vastly outnumbered, it will be impossible to cover up the entire area, especially since what they are against is inhuman, and if they start fighting them head-on, they will start collapsing from the side. To that, Gillian adds that thanks to setting up their camp with the lake in the back, they have avoided being surrounded from all directions. Afterward, Ghislaine mentions this may sound like they had a disadvantage, but it's not the case since they have the initiative of this fight. The group becomes surprised by what he means, but Ghislaine reveals their plan saying that to start off, they will divide their forces into 3 groups. Among them, the defenders will be the ones to take on their attacks, the crossbow units will stop the enemy, and finally, there will an elite assault unit of which he will be a part of. He further says that the defenders and crossbow units will gather in the middle, pushing away the enemies. In the meantime, the assault units will attack them from the left and focus all their power on that side. Therefore, if they can manage to surround them with the forces in the middle, it will be their victory. After hearing his plan, Gillian states that he understood, but is a bit doubtful about the possibility, to which Kaor adds that he thinks it's possible as long as the units in the middle hold out well enough. Just then, Belinda grabs their attention saying the young master just mentioned that the Falors are immune to physical attacks, because they can melt into the darkness, so she wants to know how they plan on dealing with them. At that, Kaor stares at Ghislaine's face for a second, and then he confirms if they just have to use Mama. In response, Ghislaine assures Belinda to not worry, and with a cheeky smile he mentions that they have the magic scrolls. Moving forward, as the Falors begin their assault, the defensive squad takes on their position, encouraging each other not to split up, just like their employer said. Then, as the last lantern is taken from them, they feel that something is coming. On the other side, Ghislaine narrates as he begins to tear a magic scroll that in the Pioneer Journal of Delphine. It stated that the followers are extremely vulnerable to lights, and when intense light is shown on them, they reveal their true selves. Then, as soon as he tears down the magic scroll, he gives others the signal, and heeding his command, all of them tear the first circle magic scroll at the same time. The moment they tear them, some beams shoot up in the sky, and to the followers' surprise, intense light engulfs the entire area, revealing their true form to their bare eyes. At that, the mercenaries become surprised to know what they look like, and adds they can't believe that those eel-looking things were surrounding them this whole time. Later, as the followers charge to attack, the defenders brace for impact, whereas the crossbow unit is given orders to stop their charge. Together, they are told to hold out on for as long as possible, when suddenly, Ghislaine raises his sword and announces to everyone that their true appearance have been revealed. Afterward, he swings his blade to the side with a commanding force, and then he notifies the assault unit to charge at the monsters. As soon as they receive the order from Ghislaine, all of them charge at the followers and each of them takes down a monster with a single strike. Ghislaine, on the other hand, skillfully swings his blade to split one of the monsters in half. As he do so, he thinks that while the followers possess the ability to assimilate into darkness, their actual defense is extremely weak, so with their party, they can pierce through them in no time. Then, he orders his group to cut their numbers down as much as possible, to which they affirm that they will. Afterward, as the team engage in combat, he narrates that Gillian will tank their attacks and keep their aggro on him. In the meantime, Kaor will disrupt their formation, and when he is in a pickle, Belinda will create an opening with her support. Then, as she finishes taking care of multiple followers, she turns her head to Ghislaine and calls him. The moment she addresses him, Ghislaine jumps toward the monsters with his weapon ready, and in a split second, he slashes down multiple followers at once. Then, with a confident look, he narrates that this is the elite power of Perdium. On the other hand, the defender and the crossbow units try their hardest to hold down the charging monsters. However, the number is greater than they anticipated, and what's more, they have run out of arrows, so they wonder when the assault unit is coming. Then, as the monsters are about to jump the defensive team, the elite forces arrive just in time and start dealing with the followers. After taking down some monsters, Ghislaine turns his way to the mercenaries and compliments them, saying they have done well. Meanwhile, the mercenaries including Gordon rejoice and believe they are saved since their employer has arrived. Soon after, they are given order to widen their formation and surround the monsters from all directions, as it's their turn to overrun them. However, one of the followers with a horn on its head gives out a signal, and to everyone's surprise, the monsters begin running away. Meanwhile, seeing that how they retreated before they could be surrounded, Ghislaine thinks that the followers are quick-witted. Then, he asks Belinda if she could their leader, mentioning that it's the one with a horn on its head, and the one responsible for sending retreat signals. At that, Kaor asks if they are chasing them, and Belinda questions if it isn't better if they retreat like this. So Ghislaine responds to them saying, they tend to obsess over their prey, and will come back to harass them for days if they leave now. He knows that they have to avoid a war of attrition at all costs, adding that their system will collapse once they lose their leader, so they will have to wipe them out here. Meanwhile, Belinda becomes speechless looking at his expression and thinks that he has changed a lot. Then, while rotating a rope covered with mana, she responds to Ghislaine with a serious expression that she understood. Soon after, she launches the rope on the branch of a tree to grab on, and in the next moment, she pulls her body to propel herself into the air. Then, as she momentarily floats above the flock of followers, she notices the one with a horn on its head, and prepares her rope to attack it. Afterward, she ties its neck using her rope, and the moment she succeeds, she announces to Ghislaine that she found the leader. Upon getting notified, Ghislaine draws his weapon and gathers his mana around his legs. Then, he blitzes toward the flock of followers while keeping his sword aimed toward the enemy leader, and taking out some small fries along the way. As soon as he gets close to the leader, he deals a fatal blow to its chest. Then, telling it that it's over, he splits the body of the monster in half. After its cold body falls on the floor, he announces to everyone that their leader is dead, and they are to wipe them out without sparing a single one. The mercenaries feel enthusiastic after hearing that and vow to make them regret for trying to hunt them down. In the meantime, Kaor orders his Cerberus mercenary members to make sure that they don't lose to that old man Gillian. Then, as the battle comes to a conclusion, the night sky fades away, and the sun starts rising. Ghislaine then kills the last one of the followers and praises everyone, saying they did well. Afterward, with a confident smile, he declares it is their victory. Upon hearing him say that, all the mercenaries lift up their weapon in celebration and rejoice, saying that they won. Belinda then approaches her master asking if he is hurt anywhere, while Gillian thanks him for his hard work. Following that, Ghislaine requests Belinda to check the head count and orders Keor to bring his Cerberus fellows, so that they come with Gillian and him to spread the Fowler's corpses around the camp. At that, Keor asks if spreading the corpses have some kind of effect, to which Ghislaine explains that the smell of the corpses will chase away the other monsters, since they are one of the monsters that are on top of the food pyramid at this forest's entrance. Gillian then calls Keor a kid, mentioning that it means the camp area will become safer, but Keor becomes enraged by it and asks if he wants to fight it out with him. Meanwhile, Ghislaine stands amidst the corpses thinking that it's been around 10 days since they entered the Forest of Beasts. Now that the Fowlers has been exterminated, they have eliminated all sources of danger from his planned route, so the only thing left is to mine the rune stones. Then, while looking at the rising sun, he makes a determined expression and wonders if it's finally over. Afterward, Belinda reports to him that there are 41 people from the Cerberus mercenaries, and 126 from the contract mercenaries, which is 3 less from before the battle, to which Ghislaine becomes surprised that there are no casualties among Cerberus mercenaries. Hearing that, Keor states with a smug face that it is obvious, as he is their captain after all. Ghislaine then asks Belinda if there are 3 dead among the contract mercenaries, to which she replies that she can't confirm their identities because there are no corpses to be found around here. Afterward, Gordon questions where Manus went, so one of the mercenaries answers that he probably died while fighting, while another one mentions that his corpse wasn't found. At that, a different mercenary states that considering his personality, he probably fled during the battle, and it's too obvious. On the other side, Manus, alongside 2 other contracted, are seen fleeing inside the Forest of Beasts. Then, one of the guys says that judging from how fierce the battle sounded, they really would have died if it weren't for Manus, whereas the other one asks if they shouldn't slow down considering that they are quite far away. In response, Manus calls them fools and hastily tells them that they need to get out of this forest while they are busy fighting. Just then, the 2 mercenaries suddenly stop running, so Manus asks them why did they stop all of a sudden. Afterward, while shaking in fear, one of them points his finger and tells Manus to look behind him. Upon looking back, they see a pair of massive reptilian eyes, and Manus questions in shock about what the hell that is. Some time later, the creature is revealed to be a humongous snake, and then it spews out the dead bodies of Manus and the other 2 mercenaries. On the other hand, Ghislaine and the mercenaries work together to quickly chop down trees, eager to pioneer the forest and get out. Witnessing them, Keor exclaims that they are working well together without someone ordering them around, and he has never seen those lazy mercenaries work this hard before. To that, Gillian fuels Keor's anger by saying that they are doing their job unlike a certain someone. Afterward, Keor asks Ghislaine if he will let them go once the work is finished, to which Ghislaine responds while felling a tree that he will be hiring them all as his private mercenaries. He knows it's common that mercenaries have weak organizational skills, so they can't win against a regular army in large-scale battles. However, those guys have already surpassed the limits of mercenaries just through the experience they have gained here, so they will serve as an excellent foundation for expanding his power. Then, Gazelle and other Cerberus mercenaries report to their captain that they have scattered the floor corpses around the path, to which Keor compliments that they did well. Afterward, he turns to Ghislaine, saying the effect seems to be good as he said, since they haven't seen a single monster ever since they left the camp up until they got here. Meanwhile, Ghislaine feels restless for some reason, so he hopes it's just his needless worry. The moment he thinks that, Belinda descends from a tree while grabbing his attention. He asks if she saw anything up ahead, to which she excitedly responds that she did. Looking at that expression on her face, Ghislaine becomes certain and orders his men to pave the path with all their might from now on. Moving forward, as they get closer to their destination, they see a shining light exuding from behind the last batch of trees. After cutting down the trees, everyone, including Belinda, Gillian, Keor, and the mercenaries, couldn't believe what they just saw. To that, Ghislaine comments with a confident smile that this is the reason why they started this expedition, and the thing before their eyes is the highest quality runestone mine. Hearing it, Keor couldn't believe that they really had something worth a lot of money, whereas Gillian told him that Ghislaine always acts upon reason. Meanwhile, Belinda gives Ghislaine a warm hug, asking about how he even knew something about this. On the other hand, the mercenaries comment that those rune stones are not something they can touch even once in a lifetime, and if they mine all of this and go back, they will be rich. However, as soon as they say this, some figure inside a thick fog tells them that they can't go anywhere, and to Ghislaine's surprise, they add that it's because it's all over now. Then, the man falls on the ground, whereas the mercenaries recognize the man as Manus. Afterwards, they try to approach him, calling him a fool and questioning how he got there. But just then, Ghislaine puts his sword in front of them and takes a stance, telling them to stand back. Following that, he raises his blade and performs a mighty swing to blow away all the fog covering the area. As soon as the fog is cleared, it is revealed that the front of the mine is covered with multiple skeletons of deceased creatures. Upon seeing that, the mercenaries cower in fear, wondering what happened here, and they think they see some human corpses aside from monsters. Afterward, Gillian and Belinda grab Ghislaine's attention, to which he comments that it seems they can't just mine the runestones for peacefully. He believes that, judging from the scale, this is likely a nest of a high-class monster, and since some of the corpses have yet to be completely corroded, it hasn't been abandoned. He then contemplates his actions, as there weren't any particular recordings that the mine itself had any danger factors. After that, he grabs everyone's attention, and as soon as he tells them to prepare for battle, a massive snake towering over the runestone mine menacingly glares at them. Then, as the snake opens its mouth to attack, Ghislaine grabs his sword and quickly orders them to scatter, alerting them of the threat before them. The next moment, he jumps before the snake can attack and follows up with a magically enhanced strike on its head. Then, using the snake's massive body as his footing, he leaps to stab the head of the snake while coating his sword in magic. However, seeing how ineffective the strike was, Gillian couldn't believe it only left a scratch despite him using mana. Whereas Kaor questions what kind of scales that thing has. Meanwhile, Ghislaine jumps from its head while protecting himself with his sword. But just then, the snake spews out toxins from its mouth. Ghislaine quickly recognizes that it's poison, so he rotates his body and protects himself against the poison by blocking it using his cape. However, the giant snake quickly follows up with an attack using its tail, so in response to that, Ghislaine draws his sword in a rotating motion. Then, he intercepts the attack using his sword strike, but the weight of the tail pushes him back and crushes him on the ground. Witnessing that, Belinda calls out to her master out of concern, but on the other hand, the snake begins to move around its massive body. At that, the mercenaries warn each other to not get swept in the attack and question why that snake is so damn huge. Then, as soon as the snake tries to squash them, Gillian saves some mercenaries by grabbing them away. Belinda pulls them with her rope, and Kaor coordinates the mercenaries by giving out orders. Afterward, while the mercenaries start screaming out of fear, Ghislaine is revealed to be perfectly fine. He then thinks that now that he sees it with his own eyes, the bad feeling he had about this is gone. Afterward, he reveals that that thing is the master of the runestone mine, Blood Python. It was one of the monsters that he considered impossible to hunt down in this expedition, but he didn't think he would have to face it, since it lived in the deepest part of the forests. The chances of winning against it are very low, and it would be best to retreat for now and come back prepared next time. However, he has no time for delays since if he gives up now, everything he has done up until now will become meaningless. Then, while gathering his mana inside his body, he tells it not to get in his way, as he has too many things on his back. Afterward, he unleashes his third core, and as soon as he does this, the Blood Python jumps him to attack. However, Ghislaine quickly responds by skillfully deflecting its mouth from the side, and performing a small cut on its mouth. Following that, he swings his sword in a rotating motion and delivers a clean cut on one of its eyes. Then, the Blood Python uses the same tactic by attacking him using its tail, but this time, Ghislaine manages to hold his ground against the attack. He greets his teeth as he tries not to get pushed away, but the Blood Python opens its mouth and follows up with multiple tail strikes, which he skillfully deflects. Then, while giving out his all in this battle, he thinks that even when winning is unlikely, there are battles that one must not avoid, and it is because it's their responsibility. Belinda, Gillian, Kaor, and the rest make a shocking expression witnessing him fight, and Ghislaine on the other hand delivers an injury between its nose, thinking that now is the time to fulfill his responsibility. Moving on, as he lands on the ground, he makes a raging expression, wondering about how the Blood Python is showing no signs of falter. He also thinks that unleashing the third core for a long period of time is too risky, and at this rate, his mana will be depleted before he can kill that monster. Afterward, Belinda and the squad rushes to him calling out his name, and while Kaor and Gillian get into a defensive formation in front of him, Belinda asks if he is alright. She then requests him to escape to safety, adding that they will hold the monster down. However, to their surprise, Ghislaine tells all of them to leave this place at once. At that, Belinda becomes confused, whereas Gordon asks his employer about what he just said. Following that, Gillian asks what he means by that, so Ghislaine mentions that even he can't guarantee their safety in a battle against such a massive monster. Then, with a stern expression, he tells them that he can't afford to lose them here. To that, Belinda asks what he will be doing in that case, to which he responds that he will defeat that monster here. Hearing him say that, Belinda thinks that what he has shown up until now has been close to a miracle, yet she doesn't understand why he is going this far. Just then, the blood pythons spew out poison on them, so Ghislaine yells at them, telling them to leave this place quickly. However, without any notice, the defensive squad holds out their shields in front of the poison, and avoids it from reaching Ghislaine's body. Witnessing that, Ghislaine becomes speechless, whereas the mercenaries request him to let them fight alongside him. They also tell him that they have never met an employer like him, and he has saved their lives so many times thus far. Following that, Kaor adds that with the damned snake gone, the treasure will be theirs, while Belinda says that there is no way she would leave him behind. Gillian then steps up, mentioning that they will draw its attention and create an opening, and with a warm smile he tells him that since they have trusted him, they want him to trust them as well. Hearing them, Ghislaine becomes speechless for a moment, but then he reveals to them that it possesses massive body and lethal poison, and since its extremely sturdy crimson scales will deflect blades imbued with mana, they will surely die if they are attacked even once. However, they could inflict some damage if they attack its smashed right eye and gaping injury. Then, he lifts up his sword up in the air and announces to the Forest of Beasts expedition team that they shall all return alive. Hearing him say that, the mercenaries feel motivated and they collectively respond with a yes. Then, as soon as the blood python begins its assault, everyone including Ghislaine, Belinda, Kaor, Gillian and the mercenaries launch combined attack on the monster. Kaor then strikes on top of the injury on the monster's right eye, and while the python turns its body to attack him, Belinda uses her rope to pull him away. Following that, Gillian raises his battle axe and slams the monster on the ground by delivering a powerful blow on top of its head. Giving the monster not a chance to catch its breath, Ghislaine charges at the monster's left eye and stabs to open a new wound. While he holds down his blade inside the monster's eye, he thinks that not everything will go his way, even if he knows the future. Then, as the mercenaries beat down on the monster, he further thinks that if he don't take action, many will die, and he won't let that happen. Afterward, while drawing his sword and jumping above the monster's head, he narrates that it's because only he knows the future of this land. Just then, the python opens its gigantic mouth and before he knew it, the monster swallows him whole. Belinda and the others become concerned witnessing that, but in the next moment, he pierces the monster's flesh from within its mouth and caves his way out of his demise by splitting the blood python's head in half. Upon seeing that, Belinda, Kaor, and Gillian feel relieved, whereas with a confident look on his face, Ghislaine narrates that he is the future of Perdium. Moving forward, the scene shifts to Perdium Castle where a man slams on the desk, telling Lord Perdium that this is a serious crime. Then, the man continues to say that Ghislaine ignored his order not to enter the forest and went inside anyway, whereas the other man tells him to calm down, calling him Albert. Afterward, addressing the other man as Homer, Albert tells him that he already knew the young lord was unruly from the start, and it seems the young lord thinks he is the lord of this land due to his long absence. To that, Homer adds there is no point getting worked up by this, as it has been 2 weeks since the young lord entered the forest. He also says that they could have stopped him had Skaven not made a false report, and he could lose his knight status because of this. After that, the conversation gets heated as they request their lord that he must take action before he causes even more trouble, and he have to imprison him the moment he returns and punish him. Then, as the lord thinks about Ghislaine's actions, an informant barges into the room while grabbing his lord's attention. He then informs the lord that he have to come down and see this, to which Lord Perdium addresses him as Randolph and asks what is the matter. In response, Randolph shocks everyone in the room saying that young Lord Ghislaine is back, and at the same time, Ghislaine is seen entering the Perdium Castle. Moving forward, inside the Perdium Castle, Ghislaine sits in front of the lord, whereas the other 3 men menacingly glare at him. Lord Perdium also speechlessly stares at him when suddenly, Ghislaine tells his father that he is back home. Then, Lord Perdium mentions he clearly stated that he wouldn't permit the development of the Forest of Beasts, to which Ghislaine apologizes, saying that it had to be done. Hearing that, the men in the room become furious and asks if it was that important to the point he downright ignored his father's order. Randolph states that entering the Forest of Beasts constitutes a serious crime, as not only could he have lost his life, but the monsters from the forest could have invaded their territory. To that, Ghislaine responds that as he can see, he is alive, and the monsters did not invade their land. Hearing his response, the men become agitated as they ask him if he has the audacity to talk back right now. Afterward, Albert asks if he finds this funny, adding that they can surely let the Forest of Beasts incident pass, since that didn't lead to any trouble in the end. However, he brings out a letter and places it on the table, asking if he has any excuse for this. Ghislaine then picks up the letter, and after reading its contents, he asks if this is from Count Rayfold. Albert affirms his question, saying he was feeling uneasy about hearing him visit the Rayfold territory, and he found out that by threatening Lady Amelia, he extorted a 20,000 gold estate support fund that was regularly sent to Perdium. Thanks to him, the Count is absolutely furious and has decided to cut off all support to their territory and cancel the engagement, as if it never happened, which will negatively affect their entire land. Meanwhile, Ghislaine finds it odd that the Count himself wrote the letter, who doesn't get along with Amelia, but it doesn't seem to be fabricated. He knows that pulling this off by manipulating the Count's money-driven mindset isn't difficult. But if Amelia is willing to join hands with her enemy just to screw him over, it means she will stop at nothing, no matter the means or methods. He had a bad feeling that simply sending assassins wouldn't be the end of it. But now the leverage he has over Amelia is useless as the secret deal, the Merchant Guild, and everything will just be dismissed as nonsense meant to cover up this incident. If he had been even a little late, he would have been tied down in the territory, so as expected, time is not on his side. Afterward, Albert requests him to say something. Homer tells him to return the 20,000 gold first, while Randolph adds that that amount of money can run the entire Night Order for months. In response, Ghislaine shocks everyone by saying that he used it all for the development of the Forest of Beasts. Hearing that, everyone becomes speechless for a moment, and then Albert asks if he is saying that he wasted all that money on a useless forest infested with monsters. In reply, Ghislaine apologizes, saying that he doesn't have much to say about the Rayfold incident. Before he can finish his speech, Randolph grabs him by his collar, and calling him a little brat, he says that he is supposed to be the successor of this land, yet he sold the future of their land with his own hands. Following that, Homer declares Ghislaine as a filthy criminal, and issues an order to tie him down and throw him in jail. However, before they can vent out their anger any further, Ghislaine assures them, saying from now on, they can receive the support fund from him, including the 20,000 gold. At that, Lord Perdium asks what he means by that, so Ghislaine calls for Belinda, who arrives inside the room while holding a box in her hand. Then, as she places the box on the table, Ghislaine explains that he wouldn't have started the development in the first place if they weren't going to bring anything back. Afterward, upon the box being opened, everyone in the room becomes shocked, whereas Ghislaine tells them that the thing before their eyes is the highest quality rune stone. Surprised by that, Homer takes a piece in his hand, asking where he got such a rare thing from, while Randolph questions if that's where he used his 20,000 gold. In response, Ghislaine tells them with a confident smile that they mined it from the Forest of Beasts. Meanwhile, Albert comments that if this really is runestone, then it will be worth a fortune, but this is nowhere near enough to run their land. To that, Ghislaine flashes a cheeky smile, saying that this is not the end of it. Moving forward, Ghislaine and Belinda take them just outside the Forest of Beasts, where numerous mercenaries work to load the runestones and monster materials that they acquired in their expedition. In disbelief, Homer questions if he really got all this in a mere 2 weeks, whereas Randolph asks if he is seeing things right now. Lord Perdium, on the other hand, inquires of Belinda if it is true that all of this came from the recent expedition, to which she affirms that the young master himself led the entire expedition, and this is what they obtained. She adds that they got the inner hide of the Durasens, byproducts from defeating the Blood Python, and the amount of runestone here is only a fraction of the mine they have left in the forests. Afterward, Ghislaine tells his dad that the reason for this expedition in the first place was to help, so it's only right that he use it for their land. Later, Albert reports to his lord that after the rough estimation, it seems that they really don't have to struggle with the lack of support funds with this amount. Homer and Randolph become shocked hearing it, and in the next moment, they start rubbing Ghislaine's shoulder, asking that he must be tired from the expedition and to let them know if he needs anything. However, Ghislaine suddenly startles them by saying that there are a few conditions for the support fund. First off, he would like Scavine and Ricardo to be released, since they only followed his orders. Secondly, he wants them to continue to prohibit civilian access to the Forest of Beasts, just as they have done so far, because if unnecessary rumors spread, it could lead to needless troubles. At that, Homer ponders about it for a bit and says that it seems reasonable enough. Then, Ghislaine sets the last condition, saying that he will take care of recruiting and managing the mercenaries and security forces himself, since having interference every time he moves troops within the territory would be a waste of time. Hearing him say that, Homer angrily asks if he intends to maintain a private army, whereas Randolph says they won't allow it, as they don't know what he is plotting. Afterward, Albert reminds him that he is currently in a position to be begging for forgiveness, but it sounds like he is simply saying he will do as he pleases, so they should stay out of his way. In response, Ghislaine tells him that's a misunderstanding, as he is merely laying out the necessary conditions to provide financial support to Perdium in place of Rayfold. If such a trivial issue were to disrupt their operations, it could negatively impact Perdium's finances as well, so he asks Albert if he is okay with that. At that, Albert turns to his brother, Lord Perdium, telling him to say something since they are currently making a deal with the future of their land. Just then, Kaor and Gillian call out to Ghislaine, and while approaching him, they thank him for his hard work. Afterward, Gillian reports that the runestone loading process is almost complete, and it is only an order away from being moved at any time. On the other hand, Kaor informs that the hides of the Duris Ent have been stored without any preservatives, and asks what he wants to do with the blood python. To that, Ghislaine orders them that the pythons will soon be dismantled, so the venom, blood, flesh, and hide will all be separated and preserved to prevent decay. Then, as the mercenaries respond to his order, Lord Perdium grabs Randolph's attention, to which he informs that the mercenaries are individually formidable and have an overwhelming presence. He adds that he has no clue how the young lord could have such individuals under him, and it's just like an elite force. Then, to Ghislaine's attention, Lord Perdium approaches him, saying he must have put in a lot of effort to get such difficult mercenaries to follow orders willingly, but he humbly replies that without them, this expedition wouldn't have prevailed. Hearing that, Lord Perdium comes to a decision and surprises his retainers by ordering them to return. As he is about to leave, he tells Ghislaine that he will let this one slide, but if he defies his orders again, he should be prepared to face the consequences. To that, Ghislaine makes a nervous expression and sincerely thanks his father. However, as Lord Perdium leaves, he also tells him that he is the successor who shall inherit this land in the future, and it seems he possessed the spirit of the Northern Wolf after all. Meanwhile, Ghislaine narrates that the Northern Wolf is the alias given to Count Perdium, who guards the frontier of the Lithania kingdom. He further explains that his father was a lonely person with a weak military power, an estate suffering from poverty, and yet in the northernmost reaches, where war never ceases, he dedicated his entire life to protecting this land, even without his wife, Alina, or his son. And in the end, he was met with a miserable death, forgotten by all. Later, Belinda asks Ghislaine to reconfirm if he will be heading straight back to the castle. In response, he denies it, telling her to have everything ready so they can leave at any time. But Belinda asks if he is not going to rest. Following that, Gillian tells him that since he has overworked himself, his body should get some rest, whereas Belinda adds it's a miracle that he made it out alive from the blood python's body. Then, she asks if he has any idea how hard she worked to detoxify him, but before she can finish her sentence, Ghislaine places his hand on her shoulder and requests that she listen to what he is saying. Afterward, as he turns around and starts walking, he thinks that to the ears of those who are looking to invade their land too, he needs to expand his power as quickly as possible, and it is to a level where no one would dare challenge him. As he thinks that, he suddenly falls unconscious on the ground, whereas Belinda and the other mercenaries become concerned witnessing that. On the other side, a pigeon delivers a message to the leader of the secret noble organization. He then opens the letter and finds out that partial reclamation of the Forest of Beasts has been confirmed, and they are to start a territorial war with the Diggold family and wipe out Perdium before the ducal house can step in. Learning that, some people at the conference table question if they should turn Perdium into a lordless land, whereas others believe the ducal house intends to appoint a new leader for Perdium. Then, the leader asks about how many of their people are still in Perdium, to which one of them answers that 2 retainers and 1 knight remain. At that, the leader orders them to send 2 retainers to Diggold's territory, since the fact that the missing Diggold heir was found dead in Perdium will be enough justification for war. He then menacingly mentions that Victor will take full command of this operation. Hearing the name Victor, the people in the conference start panicking, as they can't believe they are bringing out Desmond's strongest card this soon, and if Frank had done his job properly, Perdium would have collapsed on its own. Just then, one of the people tells their lord that Victor will undoubtedly handle the job, But he doesn't understand why the ducal house, which has always moved discreetly, is now interfering directly in Perdium. At that, the leader surprises everyone in the room, saying that it's because of the forest of beasts. He also says that every decision follows Duke Delphine's will, and they are not to question any orders. Then, as he tells them to prepare for war, he is revealed to be the Count of Desmond, otherwise known as Harold Desmond, and afterward he menacingly asks if anyone knows about this situation. Moving on, the scene shifts to Amelia's residence, where she throws a tantrum, remembering Ghislaine's actions. As her body shakes in anger, she grabs her knight's shirt, saying that Ghislaine secured the runestone mine using the 20,000 gold he took from her. Even after sending the wildcats, they failed to kill him, and she even bowed her head to her damn father to cut off Perdium's funding, so this makes her look like a fool. At that, he tells her this isn't like her, to which she lets out a sigh, saying he is right, and she let her emotions take over. Then, she states that what's done is done, whereas her knight flashes a smirk, telling her to just give the order. To that, Amelia explains now that they have found the runestone mine, Perdium will soon escape its financial troubles, at which point Bernaf believes there must be a celebration over there. However, she mentions that it might seem like it, but the important thing is that they haven't sold the runestones yet, so Bernaf becomes confused. She adds that according to their latest intel, they secured the runestones no earlier than 2 days ago, and that's not nearly enough time to establish a supply chain. Therefore, they will exploit that weakness, since it is obvious where they will try to sell them. Bernaf understands that she wants to act before they can sell the runestone and asks where that would be, so in response, she says there is only one place in the north where they can sell them. It is none other than the Northern Tower, ruled by the 7th Circle Archmage Delmod, otherwise known as the Tower of Advancement. Runestones are essential for magical research, and the magic towers are always serious about a runestone supply chain, so they will set up an ambush of wildcats on the main route to the tower. Their target isn't Ghislaine but the workers transporting the runestones, as they will disrupt the transportation, cut them off, and in the chaos seize the runestones. Hearing that, Bernaf mentions there is also the Crimson Tower in the Brivant territory, so he asks if she is sure they should focus everything on the Tower of Advancement. In response, Amelia states that the Crimson Tower lost its top position and has been in decline ever since, so judging by Ghislaine's greedy nature, he would never go to the Crimson Tower when the Tower of Advancement pays better. Then, she vows with a resolved expression that this time, she will take everything from Ghislaine Perdium. On the other side, as Ghislaine is still unconsciously lying in the bed, he recalls his memory of fighting the Crimson Viper. When he went inside its mouth, he knew that a predator would begin preparing to digest its prey. Before it passes the epiglottis into the esophagus, the venom secreted inside dissolves the prey for easier digestion. The mana released from the third core burns the venom upon contact, preventing it from invading the body. However, the toxic fumes produced in the process create a deadly environment for breathing. Most prey either lose consciousness or die during this process, but he has to endure, as if he loses consciousness here, it's over. He can't fall here since this expedition, his precious things, and his future all depend on this. With no other way out, he decides that if he can't avoid the poison, he will make it his. Afterward, he tells himself that he will absorb all the poison that has entered his body into his mana core. Using the fierce rotation of mana within the core, he will neutralize the poison. For that, he will need a delicate mana control that only those who have reached superhuman levels can achieve. Then, he will use it as an alternative fuel to withstand mana explosion. Afterward, Ghislaine suddenly wakes up from the dream and finds himself in his bed feeling refreshed. He then gets up, wondering why he is in his room, as he remembers getting forgiveness from father. At that moment, he notices Alina waiting beside his bed, and right after, she gives him a warm hug. Mentioning that he woke up after 2 days, she adds that he left without a word and suddenly collapsed when he returned. Then, she greets her brother with a warm smile, while Ghislaine remains speechless by her act. Just then, she pushes him off and runs outside the room, informing Belinda that Ghislaine is awake. As she leaves, Ghislaine gets up from the bed, thinking that after coming out of the python's body, he received only minimal first aid from Belinda and tried to endure until the rune stones were sold, but this young body couldn't handle it. But considering how reckless he was, his body is in surprisingly good condition, since sleeping for just 2 days shouldn't have been enough to recover from such damage. Then, he unwraps his bandages and thinks that something is strange. He notices that his recovery rate has drastically improved and his total mana capacity has somehow increased. However, the most unbelievable thing is that his mana's nature has changed. He wonders if the blood python's energy could have fused with him during the process of neutralizing the poison in his mana core, and he never knew in his past life that he could grow stronger this way. He didn't plan for this, but the risk he took has certainly paid off, and he needs to run some tests. Then, while clenching his fist, he believes that if this method works, he can become dozens of times stronger in no time. Right after, he opens his drawer for his clothes and thinks that for now, selling the rune stones quickly is the priority since everyone who needs to know already knows. Just as he says that he needs to gather the mercenaries immediately, someone knocks on the door. But assuming it's Belinda, he says there is no need to knock. However, from beyond the door, not only Belinda and Alina but also his father arrive, and he asks if he is awake. He adds that he heard from Belinda that he jumped into the python's body and got poisoned, so he asks if he is okay, to which Ghislaine responds yes, and upon hearing that, his father says that's a relief. Belinda then touches Ghislaine's cheeks, asking if he knows how worried they were, and asks if he is really okay, to which Ghislaine says he is fine. Afterward, his father suddenly grabs his attention and asks if they can talk for a bit. He then mentions that he has a request for him, at which Ghislaine becomes surprised. Moving forward, they arrive at the training ground, where Ghislaine thinks that this is the first time they have had time alone together. In his past life, he was always too busy avoiding him, afraid of what scolding he would get. Afterward, his father apologizes for calling him out right after he woke up, to which Ghislaine replies he is fine, as he slept for 2 days. He then asks his father about the request he mentioned, but the man just avoids his son's gaze. At that, Ghislaine looks at him, wondering if this is what his mother meant when she told him those words as a child. He then reminisces about the time when he and his mom were sitting on a grassy hillside, and his mom told him that his father is not an honest man. She continued to tell him that his father says he must be an unshakable pillar for the people of the estate, and he always puts others before himself, never revealing his true feelings, except when he confessed to her. Therefore, even if he seems a little rough, she wanted him to understand him, as he is just bad at expressing himself. Back to the present, his father tells him to pick up his sword, to which he looks at him nervously, and says yes. Then, after a brief standoff, his father quickly charges at him with an attack, which he skillfully blocks. Right after, Count Perdium swings his sword in a circle and launches a heavy attack, but Ghislaine firmly holds his ground. Then, his father tries out multiple attacks against him, and each time Ghislaine manages to effectively counter those blows. After one more clash, they back off for a bit, and as they stare at each other with their weapon ready, Ghislaine thinks about how heavy his father's sword is. He knows that it is a blade strong enough to suppress the brutal northern barbarians, yet gentle enough to protect everything precious. Afterward, as his father launches another strong attack, he blocks it using the handle of the sword, and in the next moment, he rotates his hand to offset his father's sword, allowing him to make the next attack. However, before Ghislaine's sword can hit him, Count Perdium quickly moves his sword to protect himself from the attack. Right after, they move their sword at the same time and then suddenly come to a halt. It is then revealed that both he and his father manage to aim at each other's necks simultaneously. After the match, his father puts away his sword, saying that he improved a lot, so in response, Ghislaine thanks him. However, he points out to Ghislaine that he seems to have the strength and reflexes to take down massive monsters in the forest, but it makes him think that his intent might be too easy to read by an opponent. At that, Ghislaine thinks when fighting, he usually gets a feel for how his opponent will move, but just then, he realizes that this is the first time he has been formally taught by someone. His swordsmanship is built entirely on real combat, an instinctive experience, they could say, since he never learned through proper instruction. There might be things he has unknowingly missed, so his father is pointing out and teaching him those exact things. He always thought he could only rely on himself and agonized alone, but receiving guidance isn't such a bad thing after all. Then, as he finishes thinking about all that, he lifts up his head and thanks his father for teaching him. Count Perdium, on the other hand, surprises him by saying that he actually intended to scold him. He mentions that no matter how much merit he earned, breaking the rules is still breaking the rules, so if everyone started ignoring the rules just because they contributed, it would only lead to greater chaos. However, he can see that he has changed, and unlike those who caused trouble trying to gain merit, he feels that he is looking at something beyond that. Then, he begins to leave the training ground, telling him to continue as he is, think of Perdium and those around him, and fulfill his responsibilities as a successor. Right before his father is about to leave, Ghislaine reminds him about the request he mentioned, and he still hasn't told him what it is. At that, Count Perdium becomes silent for a moment, but then he slowly faces him and nervously asks if he has any money. Then, the scene shifts to the forest of beasts encamped where Ghislaine walks up to his subordinates. Upon his arrival, all the mercenaries form a line and show him respect. Looking at that, Ghislaine smilingly asks if everyone has been doing well, to which they collectively reply with a yes. After that, Kaor comments that he looks even healthier. Gillian asks if his body is alright, to which Ghislaine apologizes for keeping them waiting. Then, he asks Gillian about how his daughter is doing, so in response he bows his head, saying that he never thought he would see her walk again, and it's all thanks to him. After their greeting, Ghislaine calls Belinda, Gillian, and Kaor, adding that he has something he needs to tell them. With a serious look on his face, he mentions to them that the estate is in danger right now, at which all of them become surprised. He then told them everything about the attack on Alina and how they tried to kill Alina to use it as justification for war, the discovery of the corpse of the Diggled Prince, and the existence of forces targeting Perdium. He tells them that there are people watching them, and they have likely been operating inside the estate for a long time, so they don't have enough time or resources to prepare for an attack. At that, Belinda understands why he was in such a hurry, as she thought they could relax a bit now that they secured the rune stone, whereas Kaor comments that this estate never has a dull moment. Meanwhile, Gillian states that if what he said is true, Perdium is the perfect target right now, as it can be seen as a weak and poor estate that suddenly discovered a high-value runestone vein. In response, Ghislaine tells him he is right, and they won't just leave them alone. Hearing that, Belinda says he should have told about this sooner, and they should hurry and inform the retainers and the Lord. However, Ghislaine stops her, saying that even Alina's knights betrayed her, so there could be spies among the retainers as well, and right now they don't know who is friend or foe, so it's best to keep this among themselves. He continues to say that thanks to Alina surviving, their plan was disrupted, and they bought some time, but now that the rune stone has been discovered, they have no reason to delay any longer. He tells them with a firm look that it's going to be a tough battle, at which everyone in the room falls silent. However, Kaor breaks the ice, telling him to just give the order, and it's honestly fun being by his side. Gillian, on the other hand, says that they have already dedicated their lives to him, and they will follow him to the end. Lastly, Belinda gets up from her seat and mentions that no one except her can protect him. Meanwhile, Ghislaine thinks about how Perdium's greatest enemy is the Duke of Delphine, and those acting under his orders, Count Desmond and Amelia. Then, vowing that he won't let things go their way, he tells the team that from now on, they are heading to the Tower of Red Flame. Hearing that, Kaor nonchalantly says they are finally going to make some money, but Belinda asks why they are going to the Tower of Red Flame when the Crimson Tower is closer and would pay a better price. In response, Ghislaine tells her that it's because the Tower of Red Flame will cause less unnecessary friction. Gillian understands what he means, as when transporting high-value goods, uninvited guests are bound to appear, so it's only rational to prepare ahead of the enemy, whereas Belinda adds that there could be an ambush like last time. Afterward, Ghislaine narrates that ever since Delmoth of the Crimson Tower became a renowned 7th Circle Grand Mage, the Tower of Red Flames has been in decline, and since then, it's been more profitable to sell rune stones at the top-ranking Crimson Tower in the north. The Tower of Red Flame is doing its best, but regaining its former glory won't be easy, and yet, the reason they are going to the Tower of Red Flame is because of her. Meanwhile, at the Tower of Red Flame, a young woman surrounded by magic books shivers in sadness and asks her teacher Leonardo when the light they spoke of will finally arrive.